So today's topic is what is here displayed, flag of Massachusetts. And actually it's the coat of arms. So this motif that's in the middle of this flag is the coat of arms of Massachusetts, which is also reproduced on the Commonwealth seal. There are 4 states that call themselves Commonwealths. Massachusetts is one of them. So I will use Commonwealth and state interchangeably. So the situation is Massachusetts has a state flag that they've had for okay, well, let me back up a second. Let me take care of some business. If you're new to Twitch and you're unaware, there is a Discord server, and you go there. You can talk about the stream in between streams. You can suggest topics for me to talk about. I don't always talk about stuff on Twitch. Sometimes I just game or play GeoGuessr or whatever. But whenever there's new flag news, I also talk about that. So today is flag news. There are some new developments in the flag world. So that's the topic for today. Did CGP Grey make a video about Massachusetts? I don't believe so. I mean, he made his video about state flags, and he did include the Massachusetts flag in his ranking. And but he did not, in his famous tier ranking of state flags, he never went into the history behind any of the designs or consider any of that. Even if it was something really egregious, like if it had Confederate symbolism on it, he just ignored it. I'm trying to think, at the time he made it, had Mississippi already changed its flag? I think it had. Yes, it had. Mississippi had changed its flag. Georgia has not, though. Georgia has a very, very overtly Confederate flag. And it kind of bothers me, actually. This is not the topic of this video, or this stream. I'm talking about, what state am I? Massachusetts. I'm talking about Massachusetts today. But just as an aside, I can't believe everybody's sleeping on the Georgia flag. It is just, they just took the Confederate stars and bars and put the state coat of arms on it. It's just like, and now everybody's just kind of like going on and like pretending like nothing happened. Anyway, so the situation in Massachusetts is they've had this flag since the 19th century. Now, it wasn't official for a long part of that. It was kind of unofficial and used for military purposes. It was used as a military banner, which was typical for states in the 19th century. States typically did not have flags in the 19th century, but when they had militias or military units, those military units would carry a flag that indicated what state they were from, and they would use the coat of arms typically. So Massachusetts was like that. But anyway, but then in recent years, there's been a movement. Actually, there's been a movement in Massachusetts going on for decades, but it never really got any traction until 2020, with all the stuff going on in 2020 culturally in the United States. In that context, it really took off. And then, and so since 2020, there's been an active program in the Massachusetts government to pick new state symbols, new coat of arms, new state seal, new state flag. So this is the flag, just to show you. This is the seal, and then this is the coat of arms. So the coat of arms is this actual design, and then they put it in a circle and write "Seal of the Republic of Massachusetts," and that becomes the state seal. A circle, yeah, and then they put it on the flag, and that's the flag. So what we're talking about ultimately is the coat of arms. Husband, no modern politics, right? Well, that's the thing about this, is modern politics gets involved, which is why I will not make a video about this for my YouTube channel, because it is political. But I guess we'll get to that. We'll get to that. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about it. Oh, Alexi, thanks for the sub. Yesterday we celebrated Independence Day in Brazil with a big barbecue. Live stream was all I needed to recover. Oh, thanks. Thanks. I hope I can help with your hangover. So let's look at the coat of arms. This is the existing coat of arms, and this dates the overall design dates to 1780. And there are 2 parts to the coat of arms. There's an inner part and an outer part. The inner part is this shield and everything that's on the shield. So this shield in heraldry is called an escutcheon. And then there's that's the inner part. That's one part of it. And then the outer part consists of this thing up top, which is called a crest. And then this thing here, which I guess is called a scroll. I actually don't know what the technical name for this is in heraldry. Yeah, Ted K. Yeah, and actually, so I don't know if I'm sure some of you have seen the proposed designs and like the new designs that are coming through the process. They've narrowed it down to 3 finalists. They look very much like Ted K type, good flag, bad flag type flags. And there is a reason for that. Ted K has been involved in this process. He was brought in as a consultant, or he spoke to the commission that was working on the redesign process. He told them, I was going to come to this later, but I'll just say it really quick. He coached them on what to look for in a flag design itself, and also he coached them on the process, the political process of going through the approval process with the government and how to win the hearts and minds of the voters and bring them on board with the idea. And his ideas were incorporated into the rubric that the commissioners, I can't remember, the committee members, whatever, committee or commission, I don't remember, but the members of the committee that are working on the redesign, they created a rubric for evaluating the designs, and the rubric owes very much to Ted K's ideas. The Dunkin' Donuts, yeah, there are a lot of really good designs that did not make it through the process, unfortunately. There's some pretty good, maybe later on, if there's time, we can take a look at some of those. As a Brit, I think if they're going to do a redesign, just make it a bunch of lads eating the tea into the harbor. Well, you're not wrong. That would actually be a really good design. Unfortunately, it would not pass muster with the good flag, bad flag principles, and therefore would not have made it through because it'd be too much complexity. Simplicity of design was one of the 5 criteria they were looking at. There's not another North Korea flag, at least not among the finalists. I was going to show the second. It went through 3 stages there were like 1,100 submissions. They narrowed it down to 48 semifinalists, and they released that in a PowerPoint file. And I just don't want to monkey with. I'm being a bit obtuse, I guess, when it comes to PowerPoint, but I just did not want to monkey with that. So I not going to be showing the semifinalists, but the finalists are actually on like websites. I can show them in my browser. All right, so the middle part, the escutcheon, which is the shield shape, that references the Massachusetts Bay Colony, which was founded in 1630 by English settlers. The outer part, which is the crest with the arm, it is showing up. The crest with the arm and the scroll, those reference the American Revolution. So the 2 things that are being commemorated in this design are the founding of Massachusetts, well, I don't know founding, but Massachusetts Bay Colony kind of in a general sense, which is kind of the, the historic precursor of the modern Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and the American Revolution. Those are the 2 things being referenced. Those are the 2 things that were intended to be referenced. Now, the seal, the reason this references the Massachusetts Bay Colony is that it takes the general design motif of the original seal that was designed in 1629 for the new colony of Massachusetts Bay that was going to be founded. Now, in this image, they drew an Indian, and they have a speech bubble coming out of his mouth saying, "Come over and help us." And that is a reference to a thing in the Bible. In the book of Acts, chapter 16, it talks about Paul and Timothy, and implicitly also Luke, because he's using the first person. But Paul and his companions are in Asia Minor, and they've been traveling around Asia Minor preaching Christianity. And then at one point, when they get to Troas, they arrived at Troas, which is at the northwestern tip of Asia Minor. Paul has a dream where he sees a Macedonian beckoning to them and saying, "Come over and help us." Macedonia is across the river, across the water, across the sea in Europe. And so they went across and preached in Macedonia, and they had a lot of success spreading Christianity in Macedonia. So when the Puritans were going to come over and create Massachusetts Bay, they invoked that idea of going across the water to a new land to introduce Christianity to new people who hadn't heard it before. But in this case, they're crossing the Atlantic and introducing Christianity to the Massachusetts people. So that's where this idea, this is where this image originates. Peach, here's the thing that occurred to me back when you talked about these seal flags. Why not just transform the seal into a flag by using all the imagery the seal is using? Yeah, like they did there are a couple of provinces in Canada that did that. Well, more than a couple. British Columbia, Prince Edward Island, New Brunswick, all do that. I can't, there must be an example in the US of them doing that, but I can't, off the top of my head, I can't think of one. But yeah, I mean, they could. I mean, that's essentially with the flag. So what you're talking about is just, I think there was actually a submission. Just take what's on the shield and make it a flag. So just make a big blue flag with a big white star and an Indian standing in the middle. That's something they could have done. It would still be considered, some people would still consider it offensive. And also the flag snobs would still consider it too complex. So it wouldn't pass muster. Oh, Cauliflower doesn't like the seal. Cauliflower doesn't like this. Do the Native Americans use recurved bows like the one portrayed? Well, okay, that's a good point, actually. And I don't think they did. We'll be coming to that later on when designs were redone later. Okay, so I'm going to skip some of the history. Basically, that was the seal that was used by Massachusetts Bay during the 17th century. And then in the late 17th century, the British the British Crown tried to centralize control, and they established what was called the Dominion of New England, which was highly unpopular, but they created a new seal for it. That was overthrown after a few years. But then from then until the Revolution, they were using seals with a lot of royal imagery. And I wasn't able to find, in the brief time that I spent preparing for the stream, wasn't able to find a better image. And it doesn't really matter. It was just like, there's the royal coat of arms on one side and the king with a colonial and an Indian kneeling. So that was what was going on in the 1700s. Then the revolution happened in 1775. Of course, they got rid of any royalist imagery, and they switched to this design over here on the right-hand side. It's an image of, there's a new seal for the new Republic of Massachusetts that was created in the Revolution. Paul Revere designed this. It's the image of a colonial soldier holding a sword in one hand and Magna Carta in the other hand. And then there's a legend in Latin going around it. And the typical translation of this into English is, "By the sword we seek peace, but peace only under liberty." And so there's a reference to defending their liberties against British tyranny. By the sword, so he's holding a sword, by the sword we seek peace. In other words, we're fighting this revolution, but it's not because we like war, we like peace. However, we can't abide in peace if we don't have liberty. And he's holding Magna Carta representing liberty in the other hand. So that's the idea. It's a similar, there were similar ideas in other states at the time of the Revolution. You have, for example, Virginia's famous, "Thus always unto tyrants." You have New Hampshire, "Live free or die." In the New York coat of arms, they show a crown cast down onto the ground under the feet of Lady Liberty. In Virginia, they have the dead tyrant lying on the ground with his crown cast off. So, you know, this kind of symbolism of throwing off royal power, of asserting liberty, and valuing liberty so much that we're willing to even fight for it. That was a common design idea, common aesthetic idea at the time of the Revolution. And that's what's being referenced there. So that was 1775. 5 years later, the Revolutionary War was still happening. They revised, made a new change. They made a new design, which is right here. And I actually cannot find good images of the 1780 version. This is actually the best one I can find. And I can't zoom in on this. Or at least if well, actually, maybe I can. Let's see. Maybe, oh, yeah. I just realized I can do this. Okay. So this was the 1780 design. And you can see this is essentially the modern coat of arms of Massachusetts. You have an escutcheon or a shield in the middle. There's an Indian standing there, and then there's a white star. Now, the white star is a new introduction. Oh, so it's different, actually. It's different in a couple ways. There's a white star, and I think that was supposed to represent Massachusetts as a new independent state or something. And then the Indian has no speech bubble. So they're actually losing the reference, the biblical callback, or the biblical reference that would have been understood, or they would have still understood it in 1780. But I think the point here is not necessarily to continue on the idea of we are establishing this colony in order to spread Christianity to the Massachusetts people. I think now it's just the old Massachusetts seal from a long time ago had an Indian standing there. And so that's what we're doing now, and as a kind of callback to the old colony. And then they have the sword, like, up here. Here's the colonial holding the sword as a pledge of his willingness to fight for his freedom. That is transferred up here and turned into a crest. Now, in heraldry, there's no relationship between, there's no intended, like, narrative relationship between what's happening in the crest and what's happening on the escutcheon. Those are separate design elements. You have the primary element on the shield, and then you have a little crest to kind of add an extra layer of symbolism to it. So we have, like, we are Massachusetts, and also we're gonna put the crest to show that we're willing to fight for our rights. And then the revolutionary slogan, by the sword we seek peace, but peace only under liberty, is scrolling around the bottom and sides. Recurve bow still. Yeah, well, that's the thing. Okay, so, yeah, that brings me to the next point, Dex. Still has a recurved bow. The arrow is still, like, that's not a realistic arrow. I don't know if you can see it very well, but it's not realistic at all. Now, during the 19th century, this continued to be the design, but it was left up to artistic license, how they would render it, like what were the proportions. And sometimes the Indian would have like an enlarged head, like cartoonish kind of thing. Like I could show you, let's see if right here. Like this, I mean, this is not necessarily an unflattering version or rendering of the Indian, but it is not really lifelike. There's a little bit of artistic license there. It still has a compound bow. The arrow still looks unrealistic with overly large feathers. And the clothing is not necessarily historically accurate either. So if you look back in the 19th century, you'll see different variations because each artist would have his own take. Because all you had to do was show an Indian standing there and holding a bow and arrow. That's all you had to show. And then, like, it was up to the artist, like, how he decided to show it. You know what I mean? Because there were all these artistic variations in the design, in the late 19th century, there was a Secretary of the Commonwealth named Olin. Secretary of the Commonwealth corresponds to what most states have as an office called Secretary of State. And on the state level, Secretary of State is in charge of various things, but among those are he's in charge of elections, in charge of the state seal. He's, or she in modern times, is the official keeper of the state seal. So Olin, back in the late 19th century, wanted to improve the design and make it more, he wanted to make it more regular, so there wasn't all this variation from one artist to the other. He also wanted to make it more attractive. He wanted to ensure that the image would be an attractive image and that it would be historically accurate and true to life, like realistic. And so he brought in an artist named Edmund Garrett, who was I don't know if you say classically trained in the context of the visual arts, but he was a trained painter, an illustrator who had studied in Paris at the Académie Julian. He was friends with a lot of other prominent artists of the late 19th century. He'd actually gone on tour of Europe after his education with Childe Hassam, who's a very famous artist from that time period. And then he came back to Boston and he set up an art studio and he worked mainly in book illustration work. Here's an example of the work that he did. So he was mainly an illustrator. So Olin asked him to do the redesign. And since they wanted it to be historically accurate, they went and studied. Garrett wrote an article for a magazine at the time where he explained the process of how they went about doing the redesign. And he talked in, like, they went through a lot of, like, he read through 17th century accounts. So this is late 19th century at this point, but he was reading accounts written by settlers in the early 17th century and their descriptions of the Indians. Of course, we don't have any primary sources from the Indians themselves in the early 17th centuries. We don't have them describing themselves or artistic work. We don't have any visual arts that they made depicting themselves. We have what the English settlers described. But he went and studied those and looked at what they said about how they dressed and, like, for example, the headdress on here is historically inaccurate. On here is historically inaccurate. But they studied how it was described. They saw that the English settlers described the Massachusetts and Wampanoag people as having a forelock and they would put a couple feathers and tie it into the forelock. So that's what he represents here. And then the bow. Notice this is Garrett's artistic work. This is what Garrett drew. And notice there's no compound bow, right? Because they found a historical 17th century bow that was kept in a local collection in Massachusetts. They knew the provenance. They knew it dated from 1665. And so he was able to create a bow that would be historically accurate to the actual natives that lived in Massachusetts, like, to make it a historically accurate representation. Same with the arrow. They found arrows. They found an arrow in a local collection that dated from the 17th century, and he used that as the model for it. He wanted to make sure the proportions of his bodily proportions were accurate. So they found a skeleton of an Indian who had died in the 17th century, and he took proportions of the skeleton. Now, this has been sensationalized by one particular activist, who I might mention later on if it comes up. Activist who's trying to get the symbol changed. But he characterizes that as some kind of like nefarious thing that he had done, as if they were dehumanizing the Indians by doing this. But that ignores the historical context for why an artist in the 19th century would do that. That was part of Garrett's training. He studied anatomy. Part of your training as an artist was to study human anatomy. And you would do it by studying live models, but you would also, painting from life, but you would also study cadavers. That was part of it. Like that's how it began. Leonardo da Vinci back in the 15th century. That's like that revolution in artistic visual representation that happens in European art, where it suddenly becomes hyper-realistic, is because of people like Leonardo da Vinci in the 15th century studying cadavers and actually studying. Leonardo da Vinci would like study each muscle and try to figure out how he could render each muscle accurately, even the little tiny muscles on a face or on legs or something. This was part of your work as an artist if you were depicting the human form. So that's what Garrett was doing. This wasn't a special thing they only did for Indians because they were racist. They were doing that because he was a human being and he wanted to render the human being accurately. That was the whole project that Olin had set for him. Make sure this is an accurate representation of a 17th century Massachusetts or Wampanoag or Nipmuc man. So that's how that happened. Now the face, there's no visual representation. Again, I'm taking all of this from what Garrett said. So Garrett explained what the intentions were and what the process was. So this is what I'm summarizing here. They wanted to find a face that was accurate as possible. And so they went with an Ojibwe chief named Little Shell, Thomas. He went by Thomas Little Shell. And they had a photo of him. Actually, yeah, I have his thing put up. So this is Thomas Little Shell. They had this photograph And they went with him for two reasons, Garrett says. Garrett says the first reason was he was handsome. I think the way he worded it was like a fine specimen or something, fine specimen of a man or something like that. The second reason he gave was that the Ojibwe are Algonquins, or Algonquians, maybe, is Algonquian, and the Massachusetts and Wampanoag are Algonquian. And so he was trying to find somebody who would be the most similar in aspect. You know, he wasn't going to pick some random, like, Southwest, you know, a Navajo or something. He wanted to find somebody who was as close as he could find related to the natives of Massachusetts. So they picked his face to be the model for, whoops, I should close that since everybody hates it, to be the model for this face. So that was the method that he went through. And then he talks also about, talks a little bit about the star. I think he talks about the star and how that's heraldically, in terms of heraldry, problematic, because the star is not a symbol of heraldry, but it was mandated by the state. And so he had to render a star on there. And he talks about the crest, and he goes into a lot of, he says they spent a lot of time on the crest because he had visited this, he had attended a talk of a guy talking about swords, and the guy said that swords are properly held like this, with your thumb extended along the shaft or whatever it's called. And so that sent him down a wild goose chase of trying to make sure that he was rendering it accurately, because he had this impression that he was supposed to render the thumb like this accurately. But the only swords they could find from the 17th century, the way the hilt is designed, it seemed like it was impossible for the thumb to do that. And so he had to do a lot of research about 17th century swords and how did people hold swords back then. And he finally arrived at holding the grip like this was the most accurate representation. So this is an example of how he was trying really hard to make this as historically accurate as he could. The sleeve is historically accurate to the early 17th century. The sword itself was chosen by Secretary of the Commonwealth Olin. It was a period sword, but he chose the sword that had belonged to Miles Standish specifically, probably because Standish's, you know, his historical prominence in the early history of Massachusetts. So that's why they chose that sword. Why would the proportions be visibly different to a contemporary person? Why not use the proportions of a contemporary Indian? And they don't explain why. It may be that they did not have easy access. They didn't know how to find one, because as far as I know, there were no Indian reservations at the time. Now, since then, there have been some reservations established. I guess I'd have to check that. I don't know for sure. It may be that they just didn't know how they could easily find somebody. That would be my guess. Given the way Garrett describes the process, I would think that if they had had a way of finding a Massachusetts native that they could use as a model, they would have done so. So what you're saying is that instead of removing the Indian, they should just make him more anthropologically accurate. Well, I'm personally not saying anything. I mean, you know, all the symbols, these, you know, I mean, it's an interesting thing to consider. The symbolism on the coat of arms references the colony of Massachusetts Bay and the American Revolution. Do those things still matter to the modern people of Massachusetts? If the answer is no, if they would rather reference other things in the symbols of the state, then I guess they should change it. You know, I mean, I'm not necessarily saying they need to keep this forever. It's like I said in my state flag video. I said, look, I'm not telling you that you have to keep the old coat of arms just because it's old or whatever. What I'm saying is, if you're going to change the symbol, at least be intentional about it. Know the history of the existing symbol. Be aware of that. And then if you still want to change it, go ahead and change it. And I would still have the same comment here. And this is why it was so annoying to me when I was reading about this. This is different from other states where, I mean, there are Redditors all over the place who want to change their state flags because they think seal on blue is stupid. They're motivated by snobbery. They think it's an aesthetic problem. They think that the designers of the coat of arms of their state and the flag of their state, they were incompetent. That's their issue. So I'm annoyed at their snobbishness. Massachusetts is different. In Massachusetts, the activists who are calling for a change in these symbols are not motivated by snobbery. They're motivated by self-righteousness. And they're motivated by a false narrative of the history of these symbols and the intent behind these symbols. So I think it's still the same thing, where my advice is still the same. Know what the symbols are, know what they actually represent, what the actual intent was behind them. If you still want to change it, fine. And I actually believe they still would. Judging by the reaction in the chat to the old colonial seal from Massachusetts Bay in the 17th century and how offended they were by that. Like, having an Indian and a star on here to represent Massachusetts, maybe that isn't what Massachusetts is to people anymore. You know, it used to be back in the 20th, 19th centuries, a large proportion of the population of Massachusetts really did look back to the colonial period and see that as part of their identity. But if modern day Massachusetts people don't see the colonial period as part of their identity, then maybe the symbol should be changed. I don't know. Let's see, Blue Jay, you mean they didn't rule the rule of cool their way through the state seals in the 19th century? That's dark. It was easier to find a dead Indian than a live one. Yeah, the Indians were very scarce in the Northeast back then. The population was rebounded a little bit, but in the 19th century, it was really hard to find somebody. Generally speaking, you did not come across Indians when you were living in the Northeast in the late 19th century. Most of the tribes in Massachusetts and really in New England in general were close to being extinct at this time. That's right. That's right. They have had a rebound in the 20th century, but yeah. Yeah, the Wampanoag still exists. That's true. Did say thought Georgia should probably change its flag. Oh, yeah. I absolutely think Georgia should say it's... The thing is, so it's about intent. Like, the intent behind the Confederate symbols. When the Confederate flag was revived in the early 20th century, and then again in the 1950s and 1960s, it was specifically as a protest symbol against integration. Well, in the 50s and 60s, it was against integration. But, like, the whole time, like, when Confederate symbols were used, when the Confederates, it's not ambiguous. The fact that Georgia keeps going back to Confederate symbols for its flag, it is specifically to represent, well, I don't know, maybe younger generations are different now. Back in 1954, when they put the X-shaped Confederate battle flag, when they put that on the Georgia flag, it was a protest against the Eisenhower administration and against integration. That's absolutely what the intent was. So when they took that off in 2001, yeah, they should have. Yeah. And I mean, unless, I guess, democracy is, the nature of democracy is, whatever stupid idea the people have is going to be, the principle for the government. That's the logic of democracy, right? So if the people want a Confederate symbol, they're going to have a Confederate symbol. But I do approve of them changing it because I know what the intent was behind the change in the Georgia flag in 1954. I also know what the intent was behind this symbol, and I know the activists in Massachusetts are completely wrong in saying that the intent of this was to represent, to celebrate white violence against Indians, which is the narrative that keeps being reinforced by the activists in Massachusetts who want to change it. Have any Wampanoag institutions commented on the flag issue? Yes, they were instrumental in the beginning of the process, because there was one of the Wampanoag leaders in the 1970s was one of the main guys who started this whole thing. Started the modern movement to change the flag. Gamo, the worst is when the flag activists lie or misdirect about the actual intent behind the symbols to get them changed, all for moral posturing. Yeah, and I feel like that's what's happening here. I think most of them are not lying on purpose. I think most of them have been taught incorrect information, and they did not bother to check to see if the information they were taught was correct. Can hate symbols be reformed with new meaning over time, or should they be retired permanently to distance from bad times? I think it's a really good question, Blue Jay. I don't think there's an easy or simple answer to that. Certainly, symbols can change their meaning. And in the case of this, I mean, that's an example of what's happened here. the symbol originally did not have a racist meaning, and then some people came along and attributed a racist meaning to it. Or like racist is too general a word. Let's stick with like celebrating violence against Indians, celebrating whites killing Indians. That was not the original meaning of this symbol or this set of symbols, but that's a new meaning that's been granted to it. And now there are many people who see this, and that's immediately what they think. This is a celebration of white people killing Indians and subduing them. But, you know, and where does that come from? It comes from people not doing their homework, not paying attention in civics class in school, or maybe it wasn't even taught to begin with. But, you know, in school, they should have taught all the kids, this is what our coat of arms is, and this is what the symbols are, and this is what it represents. Either it wasn't taught, or some of the kids weren't listening, and so they had no idea what these symbols are supposed to represent. And then they created a new meaning, an attributed meaning to the symbols that were essentially empty symbols as far as they could tell. Actually, a parallel thing's happening right now with, like, when the flag finalists were released. I looked through on the vexillology Reddit and on the Massachusetts subreddit, and I looked at the responses, how people were, like, reacting to these flag designs. And they were all saying a bunch of stuff that was mostly incorrect. You know, they were attributing they were also engaging in false narratives, where they were creating false narratives about the intent behind these symbols that were not part of the original intent. And you can know the original intent because each designer included a little paragraph explaining what his intent was behind the design, and still they would insist that it meant something else. So this happens all the time. People don't do their homework. They look at a symbol and they decide to just invent a meaning for it. Let's see. Where were we? Peach. If they think so, then I think it's only right that it's changed. Obviously, colonial period is part of the state's history, but if that part is something that the natives themselves don't see as worth honoring. Okay, no. The thing is, Peach, there's no consistent idea among the indigenous people of Massachusetts. There were a lot of different perspectives on it. And hopefully I'll remember to show you later on. They actually did a poll, and it had some very surprising results. We'll get to that later on. There's no consistency is what I should say. Some of the Indians said, like there was this one very prominent Indian, the son of the guy who started it, and one of the guys I mentioned, like there was a Wampanoag chief in the 70s who was one of the main instigators of this movement. His objection was to the crest, and that's it. As far as I know, he did not object to the representing the Indian on there. His son is now the Wampanoag chief and was involved in the committee process of the past few years. And his son said, look, all we need to do is take this crest off. But there was a native woman, because they had several natives involved in the committee processes. There was another woman who was a native who was saying, no, having an Indian on there is disrespectful. But yeah, so it's just like it was all over the place about. There's no one consistent opinion on it's not like all indigenous people in Massachusetts want the same thing. Okay, Pulip, it seems obvious to me that education of the populace is a prerequisite to a successful democracy, which is why anti-intellectualism is so scary for me. Yeah, you really, I agree. I'll just say that. I agree. Why would you teach that in school? It seems strange to me. Teach the symbolism behind the coat of arms. It's part of civics education. You know, it's like if you're going to teach, I mean, it's open to opinion. It's not like this is a scientific law or whatever, but take the Great Seal of the United States. This is the kind of thing that Americans should be familiar with as part of, like, it's kind of one of those things that goes along with being a citizen of the country. You should be familiar with what the symbols are and why they are the way they are. That's, I guess, just as my opinion. Where were we? There's also the possibility that they were taught exactly what they were spouting in their schools. And that is possible. And unfortunately, there's a mandate now that came down in 2024. It's part of the 22. There are actually two flag redesign processes. One that started in 2021, and then another a committee that came to an end in 2023, and then they started a new committee in 2024. And part of the mandate for the 2024 committee is to come up with educational ideas or like curriculum ideas for how to teach the meaning of the new symbol that they're going to introduce and also the meaning of the old symbol. If they follow through with that, I'm afraid what they're going to end up doing is they're going to incorporate into their curriculum, they're going to teach the kids about the old symbol and teach them the false narrative that it's about celebrating violence against Indians. Cauliflower, it's funny that some of the submissions appeared to have done no research on Native Americans and are a lot more racist than this flag. Yeah, I did not. I looked through some of them, but yeah, I believe you. I believe you. Yeah, a lot of it comes from a careless ambivalence to history, taught only everything wrong they did was those ancient people, though it doesn't matter because we're so much more morally better than them. And that's very much the vibe you get from the discourse in here is, well, of course, the artist Garrett was motivated by racism. He was a white in the 19th century. How could he be anything other than motivated by deep hatred and dehumanization of the Indians? That's not at all the sense you get when you actually read what he was doing, or like and like if you're familiar with the 19th century in general, you know, I mean, yeah, absolutely, it was racist. It was super racist, but that doesn't mean that every single individual white person hated Indians, saw them as subhuman. Not at all. It's much more nuanced than that, much more complex than that. The most important part is that the Wampanoag are properly consulted on the matter. But here's the thing, though. When they were talking about removing the Indian from the flag, a lot of Indians got upset and said, oh, you're erasing us. You're erasing our presence in the state. They're already such a tiny, they're like 0.1% of the population. They're already invisible in Massachusetts society. You could also, you can look at this symbol and decide it means white violence. You could also look at this symbol and decide it means we are remembering the original people who lived here. And that's how some indigenous people were saying, like, you're going to take that off the flag? Like, you're just going to pretend we aren't here? Like, that was where they were coming from. We got to be careful not to short circuit our thought process. You know what I mean? Like, and jump to one interpretation and assume that's the only natural interpretation somebody would arrive at. Sally, honestly, as someone born in Maryland, I still don't know what our flag means, but I just know it looks cool and everyone in Maryland has a weird love for it. Yeah. The Maryland flag's funny because there is also a false historical narrative about that circulates. Maybe I'll talk about that sometime. By no means suggesting they think one way or another. I'm just saying it's important that their voice be heard, whether they want it to be kept or not. Right. But given that there's not one voice, which of them? Like, whose voice are you going to favor? Since it was the anti-flag activists who were motivating this whole thing, it was anti-flag Indian activists who got put onto the Flag Commission. It was their voice that primarily got represented. Do we know how, we still don't know now what percentage of Indians in Massachusetts actually want this symbol changed. We know what the activists want. But activists, they might be speaking on behalf of the majority of Indians. They might not. We don't know. You know what I mean? And how would you do that? How would you go about making sure all the indigenous voices are heard and that all their, and how do you decide, how do you adjudicate all their different views, and how do you make sure how do you fairly make a decision to make them all heard or whatever, you know what I mean, or to have all their choices heeded. Where were we? This is the design, right? I talked about Garrett. Okay, so the redesign movement. Yeah, I basically summarized the position of the redesign movement, which is that this represents white violence. There are a couple components to this. There is the symbol can be interpreted as white violence, even if not intentedly. Or you can say that that's how they meant to do it. You could say, for example, you could say, well, that's not what they meant, but the optics are bad. Like, that could be an argument you could make. It is important to note, though, the people who have been pushing for this have consistently been saying this was absolutely the intent. And it's still the talk. Like, if you watch today, do I have my sound? I don't think the sound would work. But yeah, I found clips of Massachusetts politicians in 2024, 2025 talking about the flag change. And they're still repeating these talking points that this was designed by people who dehumanized Indians and wanted to kill them and celebrated the killing of them. There's still, there are all these like false claims being spread, like the fact that the native man is holding an arrow pointing downward. That's a symbol of pacification, that he had been subdued through military force and had now been pacified. That's complete fantasy. There is no historical basis for that being the interpretation of him holding an arrow pointing downward. That's this activist Denhold or something. I can't remember his name. It starts with a D. He's a journalist from Western Massachusetts. He's been one of the key guys. He actually created this website, changethemassflag.com. He's been going around for years to different town meetings, trying to get towns to pass resolutions to call on the state to change the state flag. He has all kinds of lies on his website. I don't know where he came up with this stuff. It's like, it's crazy. He's not native. He's a white guy, but I don't know how he comes up with this, but he's the guy who invented as far as I can tell, he invented the idea that this represents pacification, for example. But anyway, that's the narrative that's being pushed. It started being an issue in the 80s. There was a state legislator named Byron Rushing who introduced legislation in 1984 to change the coat of arms, and subsequently also as a roll in effect the seal and flag. It never got anywhere. It never even got out of committee. He kept introducing it in every session after that. For years, he served up until 2019. Every single session, he would introduce a bill. Every single session, that bill would go nowhere. And then in 2020, BLM happened, and the Confederate monuments being torn down. And so there was this new, cultural moment that this kind of narrative would resonate with. So here's this narrative of, here's a symbol that represents white oppression and violence. And this was right at the same time they're talking about Confederate statues and Confederate symbols on flags and all that. So this got kind of caught up in that, and that's what gave the momentum for it to actually go somewhere, where they created a commission in 2021 to study the issue and make recommendations. They published their report in 2023, and we'll look at that report in a moment. Healy came in as the new governor, and she jump-started the process again, created a new commission, and they're going fast, pushing through to change this because of the urgency of how evil this symbol is. My English class has taught me that interpreting the arrow's directionality like that is extremely valuable. Yeah, right. Holding it the other way around would render the man useless at offense. That's right. What's even the point of making that much stuff up? I don't know. I watched so we're talking about the guy who made this website. Oh, yeah, he created this flyer, too. Oh, and this flyer is going around everywhere, and this is establishing a lot of the talking points, and it's a lot of either false information or distorted. It's like trying to be as uncharitable as possible. Like he says, illustrator Edmund Garrett used a Frankenstein approach to create an ideal Native American image for the Massachusetts flag and seal. So he uses all this really charged language to make it sound really like he was an evil villain who was trying to make the Indians, trying to, I don't know, dehumanize the Indians or whatever. But yeah, I watched a couple of his parts of a couple of his talks. Because they're on YouTube. And he really does lay it on thick, man, with the way he's trying to make Garrett look as bad as possible and everything. Okay, Lasali, I'm not native, nor am I from Massachusetts. Solution could be to have native design elements in the flag so as to be like an appreciation if you get one. Yeah, right. I'm trying to remember if there were any. I remember there was one flag that incorporated the Haudenosaunee, what's it called? The wampum belt. That was funny because they're not in Massachusetts. But I think that was people trying to find an artistic motif. I don't know if, I can't remember if there were any designs that incorporated specifically Massachusetts tribes. Does he have a design he really wants to be used? No, he's not promoting any particular design. He just wants the old one gone. His name, it starts with a D. I can't remember. I think I bookmarked one of his videos. Yeah, I think this is one of his videos. Detmold is his name. David Detmold. I'm confused where you think the source of this is. These are people that were churned out of universities. If any state government has a strong bond with higher education, it would be Massachusetts. It's weird to say these people didn't pay attention to school. I don't think it came from higher education. It came from Wampanoag, the activists, the Wampanoag chief. It came from some other people from native, it came from the native community. I think it originally started in the native community, right? I think they looked at the flag in the 20th century and did not know, and just like because of their own experience of having been oppressed by white people, they read the symbols through that lens. I think that as far as I can tell, that's how it happened. I mean, we don't know the exact genesis of it, but it's not coming from highly educated elites. It's coming from obviously the indigenous people in Massachusetts are marginalized in society. They're not part of the elite. Does the fact that activists push narratives or make stuff up actually invalidate the causes that they support? That's a good question. Not necessarily. Yeah, not necessarily, I would say. Adex says yes. Well, I mean, it depends on if there's still a case even without the made up stuff. I'm assuming you mean that there is still a case to be made, but that they kind of besmirch their narrative by introducing a bunch of lies or a bunch of false information. Let's look at it this way. Let's consider this in the light of the actual history of the symbols. Is there a case to be made for making this change? I think so, yes. I've already talked about how if the original reference of the Massachusetts Bay Colony and the American Revolution no longer have any resonance for the modern people of Massachusetts, then it would make sense to change it. There's also something to be said on kind of a theory level that might be a little bit too abstract to like just broadcast to the general public, but the fact that there's an Indian being represented, but it was a white government. I mean, the Massachusetts government was run by white people, obviously. I don't think that's controversial. It was essentially a white government, and they chose someone who was not white, someone outside of their community, to be the symbol to represent them. You could say there's something problematic about that. I think Peach actually was probably trying to get at that when earlier on in the chat. But that you could say that's maybe that's a problem. You have this kind of like objectification, even if it's not meant to be derogatory, and it absolutely is not. I will plant my flag on this hill. This representation is not meant to be derogatory. Quite the opposite. However, you could say that even if it's not meant to be derogatory, it is still problematic in that they're using the Indian as almost like a prop to represent something. It's not really this is not a representation of the Indian from his own point of view, or from Massachusetts culture or Nipmuc or Wampanoag culture. It's a representation of the Indian from the white point of view. You know what I mean? So you could actually reasonably make an argument like that and say, we really should come up with a different symbol. That's not the argument they're making. They're making a much more simplistic and contrived and argument. But anyway. Cauliflower, I think it's tricky that because most of the Massachusetts tribes were wiped out, there aren't a lot of patterns that are really specific to Native people there. Yeah. Yeah, and I think another thing that's worth mentioning perhaps is, do we try to go with artistic motifs that date back to the pre-Columbian period, or do we, or modern artistic styles also valid to represent them? Overstand, maybe the Indian's supposed to be a model of aspiration. I think you could read it that way. I'm not sure. I feel like in the 19th century, the Indian on the escutcheon had kind of lost any particular meaning unto itself, other than the fact that it kind of harkened back to the old colony. That's the best I know. But I would say that in a kind of more general cultural sense in the 19th century, Indians did become aspirational in a sense, in the sense of the noble savage, or like, there's this kind of, especially among white people on the East Coast, people living on the frontier tended to have a more derogatory opinion of the Indians. They were the ones who were actually interacting them more on a daily basis. People on the East Coast did not have personal contact with Indians typically. It would be very rare for somebody on the East Coast in those days to have ever met a Native American. And so there arose this kind of vibe, kind of like how in the late 20th century, early 20th century, there's this tendency for Americans to romanticize Tibetan people as being deeply spiritual, or Asian people in general as being super spiritual, Buddhists or whatever. It's kind of like that. There was a romanticization of the Native Americans. Of like, there were these noble people who had simple, noble lives, and they were generally upright people, and almost like a contrast with industrialization. Like, they represented nature and living in harmony with nature, in opposition to our current way of life in the late 19th century of living in industrializing society. A similar sort of thing happened in the 20th century with African identity. You see this a lot with African identity, where there's a romanticization of, maybe not among white people at the time, but among African or people of African descent, Black people, of romanticizing African life as like this pure, more true, more beautiful way of life as compared to life in Western society. A lot of that sort of thing going on. I think we should disregard the lies and the false information and try to assess the idea purely on its merits. It might be by my idealism, but I think the only way to heal the public debate is to disengage from the bad faith arguments and try to have a reasonable good faith discussion. Yes, I agree. That's what's clouding this, and that's why I would not make a video about this, is because it's tied up in the culture war stuff, right? So it's too entangled in that broader culture war. All the the people who are complaining about this, are complaining about the change, are largely complaining for the wrong reasons, because they're just repeating culture war talking points on their side too. Both sides, it just ends up being culture war talking points, and they can't actually talk about the issue itself. Okay, so that's the movement to change it. So I said there were two commissions. There was one that met from 2021 to 2023 and ended up with a report. Which tab has the report? This is the report. Oh, no. Yep, here's the report. And I have it paged over to the part where they were doing the polls of what symbols people wanted to see. I kind of agree with you on that, Osmium. Yeah, I think part of what's happening is, I'm speaking to what Osmium just said about the good flag, bad flag principles. What you have here, you have two changes happening in a way. You can see it as, like, first of all, you're changing the symbolic reference. You're removing references to the colony and the revolution, and in so doing, you're also removing that representation of the Indian. And then also you have this other shift, which is going from a complex design to a simple design. And that, because they're going from a complex design to a simple design, you're ending up with a lot of designs that people object to on aesthetic grounds that maybe they wouldn't necessarily be as opposed to it if they were also going with a design that was as attractive. Because I would say as a piece of art, this is an attractive piece of art. And if they could come up with a new piece of art that was as attractive as this, maybe people would not be as annoyed at the proposed new designs. Attributing come help us to white man's burden is an affirmation of their narrative that America is entirely based around a racial lens. That's why I wanted to emphasize, and I think this is kind of missed, certainly in what's his name, Denhold, whatever, like the way he talks about it. This comes from the Bible, okay? When Paul had his vision, it wasn't racist. It wasn't racist for a man from Asia Minor to have a vision of a man from Macedonia asking him to come help us. When white people from Europe went to other parts of the world to spread Christianity, it wasn't because they were racist. It wasn't because they thought, well, those poor brown people are too stupid. We need to make them smarter. That to see it in those terms is to misunderstand what they were trying to do. You're taking a modern lens, a modern assumption, and attributing it back onto them in a way that distorts what they were doing and prevents you from understanding where they were coming from. The desire to spread Christianity is not a gradient that goes from white to dark or white to brown. It's a gradient that goes from non-Christian to Christian. They didn't want to spread Christianity to the Massachusetts and the Wampanoag because they saw them as inferior, or that they needed to, they saw them as needing the gospel just like everybody else needs the gospel. So I would agree with what Dex said. Blue Jay, I do wonder if the non-native people advocating for the removal of the native man from the flag just want to avoid reminders of their ancestors' atrocities. Yes, I think so. Rather than acknowledging the history involved, both good and bad. Because aside from anything else, you could simply say it doesn't matter what the symbols are. The symbols are of the regime as it existed in colonial times when the natives were pushed, were killed and pushed off their land, right? Like, if this is a representation of Massachusetts Bay Colony, doesn't matter what the symbol is. Massachusetts Bay Colony itself is the problem. We should remove any reference to Massachusetts Bay Colony. You could definitely make that argument. Yeah, right. Pre-mod canceled. Dex, what I'm saying is that this is exactly how it's taught in many universities. These people didn't just appear with these ideas. They speak at schools. Well, I mean, they didn't just appear in the universities either. That's just kicking the causation down the road. You still have to explain how it got in the universities. Okay, African Nordic. So people received it. You help come over in the middle of the night. Blue Jay, maybe making a comfortable design is their goal. Let's look at the new designs. We can talk about the survey in a sec. Let's look at the new designs. These are the finalists, like I said. So they're changing seal and flag and motto. And they've decided they're not going to worry about it. They're going to treat them as independent things, and they're not necessarily going to try to make sure they're integrated, although that is something they talked about in the meetings. Okay, Punk Ferret, I'm not American, so I don't know the full discourse around it, but I think it's important to bring in who and what a flag represents. Like, who would a star on blue mean? Anything to anyone in Massachusetts? What a star on blue. Right. Yeah, that's what makes this whole process so hard. I mean, the reason these old designs are there is because they were just picked. Sometimes you look at some of the state coats of arms, and it's like, you could kind of like, and if, it's just like the Secretary of State at some point around the time the state got its, became a state, around the time of statehood, they just kind of, Secretary of State, well, we need a seal, I'll just make a design right now, and he spent an afternoon on it, and nobody ever put any input into it because it wasn't supposed to have any function other than showing that a given document was an official statement of the government, which was the only point the seal had back then. Nowadays, people think, well, this is an important state symbol. We need to make sure that, therefore, we need to make sure we have a lot of democratic input on it. But then you become like, how do you get a whole bunch of people, millions of people, to agree on what's going to represent their state? Inevitably, no matter what design you come up with, most people are not going to like it. They're not going to resonate with it. Unless it's a pre-existing symbol that they're just carrying over. But yeah, like I think a process like this inevitably is just going to make a lot of people annoyed, because like, how do you come up with a symbol that's supposed to represent everything that everybody in the state? Let me show you. Okay, so they want to change the motto, which is, I think, the most egregious, because it's the most unnecessarily taking it out of context. The motto of by the sword we seek peace, but peace only under liberty. Like, I don't know how you can interpret that any other way than it's a reference to the American Revolution. I'm kind of baffled that people insist that it's actually a reference to white people killing Indians. But then going back, so they want the motto changed. They are changing the motto. The motto's going to be changed. So one of the things they were asking for submissions was submissions of mottos. Now, here are the three finalists for the motto. One of them is many voices, one commonwealth. Let me zoom in. Which is, to me, the most milquetoast kind of like gray, neutral thing you could come up with. It's kind of sad that's one of the, and that's just my opinion. It's just such a cop-out. It's like, well, we're not actually going to say anything. We're just going to say that a lot of people have different opinions. Copy of the unofficial motto of the United States. Oh. You talking about this? I don't think so, because the Latin is not... I don't know. I hadn't thought about that. They should have said, like, out of many voices, one commonwealth. I think they probably needed to word it that way and have an what do we... multi-vo... I don't know how to decline that. Like, yeah, like how it is in the U.S. motto. Anyway, here are the seals. The proposed new seals: a landscape with a North Atlantic right whale and a white chickadee. Oh wait, that's a chickadee. Oh, I didn't realize that. I'm glad I read the description. White symbolizes peace. There are similarities with the current flag in the colors and by including a white star. The second seal among the finalists is this one with a chickadee on it. This, by the way, is called a black-capped chickadee for our European viewers. This is a common bird in the eastern U.S. I don't know. I don't think they have these in Europe. But that's the bird being referenced. Where was I? Okay, so 6 feathers. Oh, gosh. The 6. I have a whole mini rant about the number 6. Anyway, there are 6 feathers in a circle on a crimson background. There are 6 as Massachusetts was the 6th state to join the Union. No! Oh, I can't stand this. It was not the 6th state to join the Union. There was no union for them to join when they were number 6. This is so annoying to me. So so what's referencing here is you see this year 1788 right here. They wrote the Constitution in 1787. Then it had to go to the states for ratification, and the rule was you have to get 9 states to ratify before it goes into effect. So during 1788, different states were ratifying. So it did not go into effect until you got 9 states. So until there are 9 states, there is no union for them to join. So it was not the 6th state to join the Union. It was one of the first 9 states to join the Union, to not even join the Union, to constitute the Union, to create the Union to begin with. But this number 6 is so dumb. It's like, it's so lazy. I feel like, and I see this all the time, back a couple years ago, when I got really annoyed with arvexillology and went down my villain arc of becoming, like, turning in, like, I had that Batman's parents get killed moment where I turn into, like where I just start on this road. It's because I was seeing all this snark and arrogance and snobbishness coming from people talking about flags, and they didn't know what they were talking about. And there was this whole thing on the vexillology subreddit of people who would, like, I assume teenagers, I don't know, but like people who were like redesigning state flags constantly. That was like at least 40% of the posts on our vexillology was just people saying, here's what I think the flag of New Jersey should look like. And just all the time. With like, these were people who had no real knowledge, no local knowledge of the state. They would come up with really baffling like logic for how they would arrive at their design. It was just so dumb. And one of the most common things you see is they'll put a number of stars usually, or some other number of items on the flag to represent what ordinal rank that state is in the order in which that state became an American state. And it's so dumb, especially for the eastern states, like for Pennsylvania. So the order happened. So, the Constitution was written, it went to the states for ratification. Delaware rushed to ratify first because they were just so eager to ratify it. Pennsylvania then ratified it shortly thereafter. Like 5 days after or something. And it's just because the guy rushed to Dover and they rushed through the bill in order to make them first. Pennsylvania kind of took their time a little bit. 5 days later, they ratified it. And so now Pennsylvania is the second flag to ratify the Constitution. And now you have all these people on our vexillology designing new flags for Pennsylvania that have two big old stars, just two giant stars on the flag. And they're like, oh, it's because it's the second state. As if the people of Pennsylvania are proud or care that they're the second state. Like, why is that the thing that's going to represent them? And here again, like, who in Massachusetts actually cares that they're the sixth state? Why is that one of the things that makes Massachusetts Bay Staters proud to be a Bay Stater? Like, the fact that you were number 6 in line? It's so weird. Like, that's the thing you're going to go to. You have a very limited space on a seal or on a flag. You can only fit so many symbols on there. And one of the things you're just going to represent is the fact that it was the sixth state. So dumb. Anyway. Yeah, I think snobbery hits 10 times as hard when the person in question has no clue what they're talking about. Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, my origin story, right? TYZJ, you are technically correct. I mean, they didn't all declare independence at the same time. There was some of them were 1775, some were 1776, but yeah, I think when you're talking about the first 13 states, it doesn't really mean anything to put them in any order. That order is just okay, the first 10 or 11 states, the order means nothing. It's just a pure technicality. The fact that Connecticut, because part of it with Massachusetts, it's because the general court, the state legislature, happened to convene a little bit later than Connecticut's did. And so the Connecticut passed it a few weeks before Massachusetts did, just because of the legislative calendars. Right? So now, is it Connecticut's 5 and Massachusetts is 6, I think. But it's pure administrative happenstance that it worked out that way. Flag should have things people from Massachusetts are really proud of, like Boston Red Sox logo. Yeah, and there were all those Duncan submissions, and I'm like, why can't these people have any levity whatsoever? They always have to be so serious. Oh, there's going to be a serious representation. Have a dinosaur drinking a Duncan coffee. Why not? Why is that bad? The fact that Massachusetts, of all places, is struggling to find historical symbolism. Dex! Exactly, Dex. Why is Massachusetts the state where this is going on? Well, no, I'll tell you why. Because it is a specific, it's a specific thing. Like, one of the things that some of the committee members were talking about was, we should think about symbols that are aspirational, right? Maybe we shouldn't be looking to the past. We should be looking to the future. So they're talking about stuff like that. They're like, maybe the historical stuff is stuff we don't need, right? Because they think of anything that happened in the past as being contaminated by white supremacy. So like, why would you carry that over into our new, into our new flag and our new seal? At this point, you should fully commit to the idea and just arrange all 50 states into a numerical list, and then each state should have that blue flag with a corresponding number of stars on it. Yes, exactly. You shouldn't have been a historian. You should have been a vexillologist. There's no money in vexillology. That's why I went into history. Oh, hey, Glockel. I'm probably saying that wrong. What if all state flags were just QR codes for the state's website? I don't know. I feel like it's going in that direction. You want to hear another pet peeve of mine? It's when they make license plates and put a URL on the license plate. I can't stand that. Florida does that. Pennsylvania does that. I'm sure there are a couple of other ones. I think Tennessee maybe does that. I hate it. Skip the middleman. Those stars might be hard to read. Just put a nice, stunning graphic element of the number. Yeah, exactly. Just have a big number 6. Anyway, getting back to the description, the chickadee, the red seal with the chickadee. Turkey feathers are often associated with health and well-being, and they are also a common symbol among the Massachusetts indigenous communities. They appear frequently in clothing and decoration, and play an important role in ceremonies and dances. The circle shape represents harmony and continuity. They face clockwise, so referring to on the flag, they face clockwise. Anyway. The color crimson, a lot of this also applies to the red flag down below. Color crimson is associated with education, as crimson is used as official color by Arlington Public Schools, UMass Amherst, Harvard, and MIT. There's a black-capped chickadee in the middle. Chickadee is the official state bird of Massachusetts. Underneath the Commonwealth of Massachusetts text, the dashed circle has exactly 351 dashes on it. This symbolizes the 351 municipalities in Massachusetts. Now that I can respect. Number of municipalities, I respect that. And I was kind of wondering why there aren't more flag submissions, why flags didn't get to the finals that have the number 14, which is the number of like historical counties in Massachusetts. A diamond shape is often found in art within indigenous communities. There's a diamond right there. Symbolizes the balance between humans and nature. 1788 was the year that Massachusetts became a state. Motto submission, we are one and free. Oh, that one make it to the finals? Oh, man. So this person submitted seal, flag, and motto that were all kind of, that all were thematically related. The motto did not make it to the finals. Okay. The new motto, okay, we can skip that since that's not even in the finals. All right, so the next, whoa, this one's hilarious. So this is one of the 3 finalists for the state seal, and it says State of Massachusetts on it. That is hilarious. Okay, wait. ISAM prescription. I'm saying that wrong. Literally just finished your defense of state flags video and I saw you were streaming. Wow, you timed it perfectly. I don't usually talk about flags. I just happen to be talking about flags this time. Let me get caught up on here. They should have done 351 stars. That would have been great. Who really cares about their county nowadays except very rural people? Well, rural people need representation too. No, that's a valid point. I was trying to think of like what would be a good numerical motif if you need to fall back on a numerical thing. Okay. The submitter said the star from the current flag has been transformed to a sun shining on a stylized Massachusetts landscape with water, hill, and mountain shapes. Yeah, I'm just like, wow. Okay, anyway, moving on. The flags. Here are the flags. This one got a lot of hate on Reddit. I actually forgot to check X and see what the discourse is there, but anyway, I did look at the subreddit. A lot of people hated this one. And this is the one in particular that a lot of people were missing the point because they didn't read the submitter notes. They don't know what the design intent was behind it. And so they were coming up with all kinds of dumb ideas of their own that were wrong. All right, so this design is named the Blue Hill Banner, and it has three major elements. The first element is a blue hill shape located on the hoist side of the flag. The shape symbolizes both the hilly terrain of the state and its indigenous namesake. The state was named for the Massachusetts tribe, whose name translates roughly to "at the Great Hill," referring to a specific hill that is better known today as Great Blue Hill. Second element is a set of 6 blue and white waves stretching out from the hill toward the fly side of the flag. These represent the state's vibrant coastal regions, and the number 6 commemorates Massachusetts being the 6th state to join the Union. Lastly, the canton of the flag displays a golden 8-pointed star centered atop the hill. The star's 8 points echo the shape of a compass rose, honoring Massachusetts' status as a maritime hub, and its location atop the hill alludes to a famous sermon given by John Winthrop before the founding of the Massachusetts Bay Colony. Interesting that there would still be a reference to the colonial era. Perhaps the most famous passage of this sermon asserts that we must knit together in this work as one man. We must be willing to abridge ourselves of our superfluities for the supply of others' necessities, for we must consider that we shall be as a city upon a hill. The eyes of all people are upon us. While much of the Eurocentric and imperialist ideas of Winthrop's colonial era are regrettable and far outdated, driving sentiments behind this passage, those of putting the needs of the many over the needs of the few, ring true for the principles that I hope will guide the modern state of Massachusetts. All right, so that's the Blue Hill Banner. The second one is the Mayflower flag. In the center of the flag is the state flower, the Mayflower. The Mayflower is a powerful symbol of Massachusetts' founding history, representing the arrival of the Pilgrim's ship in 1620 and the establishment of Plymouth Colony. The 5-petaled flower also holds significance in Native American traditions. Indigenous peoples of the Northeast, including the Wampanoag and other Algonquian-speaking nations, used the plant for medicinal purposes. The shape of each petal is the exact shape of the shield on the current state flag, acknowledging the flag's past. The bud of the Mayflower is a 6-pointed gold star. The 6 points represent Massachusetts' admittance into the Union as the 6th state. It's like, do people think that the Union came into effect when Delaware was the first state and then it's the United States and it was just Delaware? I'm sorry. I really need to move past this. All right. Bud. Okay, got that. Gold color represents the golden dome of the Massachusetts State House. The dark blue background represents the deep waters off the coast of Massachusetts, commonly referred to as the Bay State. Massachusetts has depended on them for sustenance throughout its history. Oh yeah, you guys talking about Macau? Yeah, Blue Macau, right. That one Shogun Total War faction. Yeah, there are a lot of things like that. Yeah, it looks a lot like that. I was thinking like Japanese prefecture, which is not necessarily a bad thing. I don't think we have any state flags that look like Japanese prefectures or like Macau or whatever. So, why not? I don't know. Some people on Reddit were complaining that since it's blue, it'll look just like all the seal on blue flags and therefore will be indistinguishable from them. Which is dumb. The United State of Delaware, right. So that's that one. The third flag, with this flag design, there are 6 feathers in a circle on a crimson color background. There are 6, as Massachusetts was the 6th state to join the Union. Turkey feathers are often associated with health and well-being. Oh, yes, so this is repeating some stuff that was written about the chickadee seal. Appear frequently in clothing and decoration, important role in ceremonies and dances. Circle shape represents harmony and continuity. They face clockwise to symbolize progress and moving forward. And the color crimson is a reference to higher education. Well, Arlington Public Schools and higher education. I would like this one if they included the chickadee seal in the middle. Nope, that's too complex. Put the chickadee in the middle. Nope, you can't do that on a flag. No, because if you do that, it instantly becomes too detailed and then nobody can recognize it. Clockwise symbolizes the tightening of the screw. Does crimson represent higher education generally? No. So different universities in the U.S. will have different color brand, part of their branding. They'll have different colors. It so happens that there are several universities in Massachusetts that use crimson as one of their colors. Harvard, University of Massachusetts, the main campus, MIT, and those are some of the prominent universities. Well, Harvard anyway. Harvard and MIT have a very high profile nationwide. UMass Amherst, not as much. Osmo, I interpret this flag as being a blood-soaked canvas with feathers looted from Native Americans on it. That would be hilarious. As soon as they adopt this, we should start a new activist movement saying, how dare they create a flag that celebrates violence against Native Americans. That's the thing about symbols. It's so easy to just create a meaning for it, because symbols don't have intrinsic meaning, right? Like no symbol has any intrinsic meaning to it. The meaning is always something we attribute to it. So you either refer back to and rely upon the what the designer meant, or you say, well, when I see this, I see X, therefore it is bad or good or whatever. All right, and then the mottos. So I already talked about many voices, one commonwealth, and I kind of told you what I think of that. Okay, well, let's read the submitter notes. Many voices, one commonwealth. So remember, so the existing motto is Latin, but it's the common translation for it, which is a loose translation, is by the sword we seek liberty, but liberty only under justice, or only under. Oh, sorry. By the sword we seek peace, but peace only under liberty. So here the submitter says, many voices, one commonwealth encapsulates a vision of diverse participation and collective identity. It's a unifying message that reflects modern Massachusetts while honoring its rich, multifaceted past. Altogether, the proposal is a striking synthesis of visual clarity, historical continuity, and inclusive values, perfectly aligned with the Commission's call to honor both the Commonwealth's legacy and its living, evolving character. Then the next one is, we honor all life guided by the first light. This is a reference. I haven't read this yet, but this recalls the fact that the Wampanoag people, actually, let me show you. I don't think I have. How would I find the, if I look up Massachusetts people, maybe there's an map I'm going to show you. Yeah, this is the map I want. All right, so this shows where the native peoples were at the time of contact. And the main ones in Massachusetts that still have a presence today, although albeit a very small one, because they only number each of them numbers a few thousand. The Wampanoag lived in southeastern Massachusetts in what was the Plymouth colony, which was a separate colony originally. So if you think of the Pilgrims and the first Thanksgiving and all that, that's Wampanoag. And they live in down southeastern Massachusetts. Nowadays, I don't know about the Nauset. I'm not familiar with them. The natives of Cape Cod identify as Wampanoag. But I don't know the history of the Wampanoag or how that happened. The Massachusetts people lived around Boston Harbor. Massachusetts Bay is this Massachusetts, this bay right here, and like where Boston was founded. So Plymouth was founded in 1620. They lived alongside the Wampanoag. 10 years later, Massachusetts was founded, colony of Massachusetts Bay, there was another group of people that came over in other ships. They founded Boston, and they lived among the Massachusetts. And then inland, they're the Nipmuc, who are also still around. So the Wampanoag, as they were living on Cape Cod, they call themselves the people of the first light, because they're out like farthest east. So when the sun rises, it hits them first, right? Just in that local area. If you go up to Maine, Maine is farther east. So this only applies to the local area. So when it says first light, that's a reference to that. We honor all life guided by the first light. Now the submitter notes, in response to the call for a motto, seal, and flag design that would represent the diversity and history of the Commonwealth, I wanted to incorporate a tribute to the first Massachusetts peoples. The Wampanoag and other tribes, all of them were people at first light. Oh, I thought only the Wampanoag were. This says the Wampanoag and other tribes were known as people of the first light. Our task as current Massachusetts residents is to honor the truth of the past and strive to move forward in harmony. So my suggestion for a new motto is honor all life guided by the first light. The third motto is, we rejoice in the public good. Bono publico laetamur. Laetamur. The Beverly Public Library has that's a city in Massachusetts, has a bronze seal in its floor that has a motto originally written by Benjamin O. Pierce. It says, Bono publico laetamur. It translates to, we rejoice in the public good. Ever since I read that on a Beverly Public Library Instagram post, I've thought it was such a perfect motto for any public entity. I'd like to submit it as a possibility for the state's motto. It expresses a hopefulness and joy about building things for communal benefit, which I think captures the best of Massachusetts. Those are the 3 finalists. Now, I don't know the exact rubrics they used for deciding on the mottos. And we actually, so I'll talk a little bit about the rubric for deciding on these finalists for the flag submissions. I'm not going to show you the other submissions. I mean, we can maybe look at the silly ones later if there's still time, but for the flags, they did come up with criteria. Let's see. Yeah, it's right here. I could not find the actual rubric they used to decide to narrow down the submissions to the finalists. So all I could find was this bit in the meeting minutes of so this is the Seal, Flag, and Motto Advisory Commission meeting minutes from June 23rd of 2025. And I didn't go and watch the recording. Maybe Ms. Fox elaborated a little bit more. I just read the minutes for this one. But she says, so Ms. Fox stated that the Criteria Development Subcommittee reviewed the proposed flag rubric and asked that the full commission adopt the recommendations of the subcommittee, which include the following: simplicity, color use, reproducibility, originality, and representation. Those were the 5 criteria. And they did a 1-point. I was able to piece some of this together from the context from other discussions at other times. But simplicity, color use, reproducibility, originality, and representation were each 1 point. But they would rank each one on a scale of 1 to 5. I mean, and then they would add it all together. That would be the total score for that flag. And then the flags with the highest scores moved into the finals. Now, simplicity. Now, bear in mind, this was in June. I believe Ted Kaye had met with them a month earlier, I believe, if I'm remembering the chronology right. So around May of 2025 is when, of this year, is when Ted Kaye met with them and taught them the good flag, bad flag principles and stuff. So here, one of the criteria, oh, let me zoom in, actually. I can zoom in. Okay, so the first criterion they used was simplicity. That's got to come from Ted Kaye. It doesn't say explicitly here what comes from Ted Kaye. That's got to be a Ted Kaye thing, though. So that, so they were like, if the flag wasn't simple enough, they would mark it down. They would get lower points, and that's why we end up with these flag designs that are very simple. The Mayflower design, the Macau design got through because it's a very simple design. It probably got a 5 for simplicity. Color use. I'm not really sure exactly what that's supposed to refer to. I can only guess it refers to one of the 5 principles in the Good Flag, Bad Flag pamphlet, which is use 2 or 3 basic colors. Don't use any crazy colors that aren't part of the basic flag palette. And make sure the colors complement each other well. And you'll notice on those flags, they use, let's look to make sure that I'm not just saying stuff. This has 3 colors. This has 3 colors. This has 2 colors. So yeah, these adhere to, you either have 2 or 3 colors, but not more or less. Where was it? Okay. The third one is reproducibility. So I think that's a reference to I'm guessing here. I might be wrong, but I believe this is a reference to, does the flag look good at really small scales, really large scales? Does it look good when it's digital on a website? Does it look good in print? Does it look good in cloth? So make sure it looks good in all those different contexts, and also when it's blown up really large and also really tiny. Can you still understand it? Could you still see all the detail when it's really tiny? I think that's what that's a reference to. lapel pins, that kind of thing. Punk Farad, I don't know if I said it to you before, but your YouTube videos on the state flags made a friend of mine abandon good flag, bad flag. Oh, that's awesome. I'm glad I was able to make a difference in the world. Okay, so originality, speaking of the main flag, Overstand mentioned the main flag. That might reference the fifth principle in the good flag, bad flag pamphlet, which is be original or be, I don't remember how it's phrased, but either be completely different from all other flags or be similar to some other flags intentionally in order to show a connection with that other place. So that might be what this is about. But it's interesting you mentioned that, because I was watching one of these commission meetings, and one of the members, actually I think it might have been Ms. Anderson, but I can't remember for sure. But she was saying how she was ruling out all the submissions that had pine pine trees on them. There were a ton of submissions that had pine trees, and she would rank that no points for originality or something. I don't know what her exact rubric strategy was, but she was trying to eliminate all the ones with pine trees when she was doing her evaluation, because she's like, that's Maine's thing. Maine has the pine tree flag. They had that pine tree flag with the election back in 2024 that failed. They have their new license plate that has the pine tree on it. So we're going to let Maine have the pine tree. We're not going to steal their symbol, is what she was saying. Now that's crazy, because the pine tree is not just a symbol of Maine. It's a symbol of New England in general. And there's this flag of New England. Looks like this. Has a pine tree on it. This represents all of New England. It's not specific to Maine. And then another flag. This was probably the flag design, or possibly this, that flew at the Battle of Bunker Hill, which was a battle in the American War for Independence that was fought in Massachusetts. It's one of the famous flags in U.S. flag history that in modern day is usually rendered like this because of a printing error in the 19th century, and a certain book in the 19th century made everybody think that the Bunker Hill flag was blue. That's a mistake. So it was either this or this. We don't know exactly, but it was a red ensign, but instead of having the Union flag in the canton, they had a pine tree representing their region. And I believe, if I remember correctly, there were a number of submissions in the initial submission stage that referenced the New England flag in various ways. Yeah, in fact, you could make the case that all New England states sharing the pine tree would be a nice homage to the New England flag. Yeah, I agree. But this one commission member said, no, that's their thing. It wouldn't be original for us. We'd be just stealing Maine's symbol. And I'm like, I was sitting there thinking, wait a second, you're on the flag commission. Are you not familiar with the flag of New England? Are you not familiar with the Bunker Hill flag? Like, are you not familiar with the fact that like you think it's a Maine thing? Like I was baffled. Like, how do you decide to serve on the commission and not educate yourself about the history of the symbols in your state? It was so weird to me that, like, she's on this commission, she's one of the people making this decision, and that's where she's coming from. You can still see a few people flying the New England flag. Yeah, it is an actual regional flag that actually has some traction with the public, kind of like the Doug flag out in the Northwest. Like, it's there. In fact, I think there are three regional flags I can think of. There's the New England flag that have some public buy-in. The New England flag representing New England as a, like showing pride in being from New England. The Doug flag in the Northwest to show your pride from being the Pacific Northwest. And then the Confederate flag to show your pride from being from the South, which has, of course, problematic connotations. It fixates so much on the originality while forgetting that heraldic tradition is all about showing descent and connections. A symbol showing a shared New England heritage would be perfect on brand for a good state symbol. Okay, so the mention of heraldry, that was actually raised by some people at certain stages of the process. They would say, actually, the fact that it's heraldry is a problem. That's part of the fact that it's racist, because heraldry is a European thing, and we need to come up with a visual language that is not rooted in Europe, because we want to be a place for all people. We want to be inclusive, you know? And using something that's specifically European is not inclusive. That's basically the idea. Now, I'm not saying that everybody who's involved in the process believes that way, but that was an opinion that was voiced in a couple of these meetings anyway. But that goes back to the question of, like, when you're constructing a symbol for your state, such as a flag, like, you're going to have different people with different philosophical standpoints. Like, they're starting from different places about their goal for what this is supposed to represent. That's that whole aspirational thing that some of these committee members would talk about. We're not going to focus on the past. We're going to focus on the future. We're going to focus on what we can all become together. Why are all the voices on the commission apparently in lockstep on this topic? Yeah, it was interesting to watch I watched more of the first one, the 2021 era commission. 2020, they were meeting in 2022 and 2023. It was interesting to see the dynamics on that committee, because there were several Native members and also a couple of the white members of that committee were very gung-ho with the narrative that this is a symbol of white violence against Indians and a celebration of that, and that was intentional. And then you had the state archivist was on the committee, and he would try very gingerly to kind of like educate them, be like, well, I mean, that's certainly a valid point of view. And, there's a certain, there's definitely, there's been a lot of oppression of Indians and silencing of their voices. However, he'd be like, that's not the original intent of the symbols. And he was almost using like therapeutic interchange to like kind of slowly walk them back from their very strident, moralistic pose that they were taking. Couldn't that argument easily become flags are European and therefore we shouldn't use them? Yeah, that's funny you say that. I actually thought the same thing. Like, why are we even doing a flag in Massachusetts at all? But I feel like that's a very valid point. I just think that the people who are involved in this have not thought to that, thought it through to that point. But I think that's a very valid point to raise. Peach, well, if we're going to dismiss heraldry as Eurocentrism, then we might as well just get rid of the concept of a flag. Yeah, exactly. Okay, Osmium, being the first state to abolish a flag would be based. Yeah, they should just lean in on, we're going to completely unmoor ourselves from any association with our past as a colonial state, a colonial settler colony. So that was the criteria they used. Oh, I didn't finish. Representation was the fifth one. So they wanted to make sure something that talked about, again, I don't know exactly what was intended by representation. I don't know, fully, but I know that in some of the other conversations that the commissions were having, they talked about how important it was to have nothing on the flag be specific. Oh, coming back to the representation of the Indian on the flag, this touches on that. So you have this existing coat of arms with a man here, and the man. Part of the controversy is the face is not even of a Massachusetts native. He's an Ojibwe who comes from the upper Midwest, or even farther west. I think Minnesota or somewhere even farther than that. Well, Minnesota's upper Midwest, but maybe Montana, somewhere out there. And so what happened was one of the Wampanoag, I think Mashpee Wampanoag tribe, they had a meeting to talk about it. And they said, what we want is to take this figure off the coat of arms and put a certain Wampanoag chief on there, a historical figure from Wampanoag history, put him on there. So this kind of goes to show like how the diversity of viewpoints among the natives in Massachusetts. This particular one, there are like 2 or 3 Wampanoag tribes. I think there are 2 that are federally recognized, and then I can't remember the details. But anyway, the Mashpee Wampanoag who live on Cape Cod, that was their suggestion. So their chief was the guy, the Mashpee Wampanoag chief is he's on this commission. He came back and said this is what they voted on, and then this other Native woman said no, that wouldn't be fair. That wouldn't be fair to the other Native peoples that from Massachusetts. It wouldn't be fair to the Nipmuc, for example. So they ended up deciding, we're not going to have any human representation, any human being on the flag whatsoever, because it has to represent every human being. And then I was reminded of that joke on the show Community. I don't know if any of you've seen Community, but they were arguing about what the mascot of the school would be, and they kept saying, well, if you pick this, it's not going to be representative. It's not going to be, you're excluding people. We want a mascot that's going to be inclusive of everyone. And so they end up with this generic human being that has no actual like discerning physical characteristics. It had that vibe when they got to that point of the meeting. All right, all I know how to do to answer you, Osmium. Here's the chickadee. All I know what to do. Oh, I was going to show this too. I guess since it's here, kind of explain what a crest was. I guess we're kind of past this point now, but oh yeah, I guess talking about the crest. I don't know. Might as well just talk about it. So we have the crest here at the top of the coat of arms. I already talked about, like, that's a separate visual element of heraldry. It's not supposed to be interacting with the shield. A lot of people were saying, oh, this represents a white man about to cut off the Indian's head or about to kill the Indian, right? As if that were the intent, the design intent, which obviously not. But but the crest, so I was going to talk about crests in heraldry. There are some other, and we can see in the context of the state flag, you can see where the crest is. Massachusetts is one of just some fun state flag trivia facts for you. There are 4 state flags that have a crest on it. There's this one. There's Kansas. Here's the flag of Kansas. That's the crest of it, and it's a sunflower, right? And you always have this rope. That's part of the crest thing, is you have a rope and you have a little thing coming out of the rope. Another one is the flag of Wisconsin. This fun little monstrosity. But there's the coat of arms, and then right there is a beaver as the crest. And then what was the 4th state? Oh, I forgot what the 4th state was. Shoot, I'm going to remember as soon as... It's not Kentucky. Actually, there's an easy way to figure this out. I'll just find something that shows all of them. And... yeah, we can just scan really quick. Oh, wait, does Delaware? Oh, sorry, there's not 4, there's 5. Delaware has a ship. And then... doesn't really matter. I don't know why I'm gonna, like, bring the entire... Michigan, I guess that counts as a crest. I'm not sure if that eagle counts as a crest. But yeah, it's really important that I bring this entire... oh, New York. New York has this crest. This entire stream to a halt so I can find the exact states. But anyway, it's a really common thing in coat of arms to have this thing up top. And in military heraldry, and actually in the first commission, the 2022 era commission, they also had a guy from the National Guard who was like the heraldry guy for the Massachusetts National Guard. He did not talk very much. I was disappointed. But in military heraldry, in the United States at least, every regiment has a coat of arms with a crest on it. And for the state units that are part of the National Guard, there's a special state crest that's unique to each state that shows that that unit is from that state. And so for Massachusetts, the state crest is the arm with sword. And these are some examples of some units in the Massachusetts Army National Guard. So I was just going to show that as a visual thing, but the way they formatted the submissions was shockingly bad. Oh yeah, I know. Like they just had this PDF like with 1,200 pages, and you're supposed to page through, and each motto was on its own page. It was awful. Like if you're trying to get public buy-in, you need to do better I don't know. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter about public buy-in at that stage because it doesn't matter what the original submissions were. They were already going to decide. I think the whole point of the commission is to arrive at a single proposal. I don't know. Does Pennsylvania count? Oh, Pennsylvania was another one. Yes, it does count. You're talking about crests. Yes, Pennsylvania has a crest on it. Wait, where was I? Yeah, let's all look at state flags. Yes, it has an eagle. That is a crest, yes. The rope is sort of draped on top of the escutcheon in this particular artistic rendering of it. Beaver. Oh, that's right. Somebody has a beaver, too. I guess there are more than I realized. Oh, no, the beaver's not... That's not a... I don't think that counts in Oregon. Anyway. Oh, in Wisconsin, that's not a beaver. That's a badger. Oh, Vermont was the one I was trying to remember and couldn't. It's a buckhead. Anyway, yeah, that's a badger. That's the symbol of Wisconsin. Where was I? So I talked about the criteria. Okay, so these were the 5 criteria they used. There was something else I was going to talk about. Oh, I was going to talk about this. I've already talked about the fact that there's a diversity of viewpoints among the indigenous people. This will be an interesting case of this. So, actually, this is an interesting thing in the way it speaks to the designs that have made it through to the finals. So they did. So the commission that met from 2022 to 2023 wrote a report, which is this, in 2023. I said on Discord I wasn't going to read it, and then I ended up reading it because I started getting fired up. But they did 2 different polls. They did one that was a representative poll that used, I think, mail-in, and they got 2,100 submissions or something. So they used that. And then they also did a web poll that was not statistically representative, but got a much larger sample size. And then they published the results of both of the polls. And one of the, they talk about the age of whatever. But the one of the things they asked on the poll was, what are your preferred symbols for a state seal and flag? And each of these is one of the proposed symbols, and then people could rank it as they strongly like it. They do one of those, what's that called? When it's like 5, strongly agree, neutral. What's that called? I forget what that's called in statistics. I had $1 every time I presented on something that I didn't think would be interesting, turned out to be interesting. Awesome, yeah. It's crazy how many random things out there can turn out really interesting. I didn't actually expect the Massachusetts flag thing to be interesting. I was just going to show the proposed the submissions, have a bit of a laugh, and then play some redactyl or something. But I kept going further and further down the rabbit hole. I was like, there's so much going on here. A Likert scale. Thank you, Sebi. Yes, a Likert scale. The preferred symbols. This is the representative sample, the RSS respondents. That's the representative sample. So, shape of Massachusetts was the most preferred design element, with 70% of people saying strongly like or somewhat like the idea of the shape of Massachusetts, which just shows the show. You should not be asking the general public for design ideas. Because, I don't know, I just personally think putting the shape of your state is lazy. It's a lazy move. It just means you can't think of anything more interesting about your state. Which I guess in most cases, most people can't think of anything interesting about their state, because all states, especially in modern life, they all are pretty similar. We just have different brands of supermarket in different regions of the country and different convenience store chains in different parts of the country, and that's about it. Coast or shoreline, 60%. Right whale. This is an interesting one. Lots of people thought the whale would be a good thing to put on. A right whale is a particular type of whale that lives in that region. And then the Mayflower, which I assume everyone understood is supposed to be the flower and not the ship, but I don't know, but that's what that is. Cranberries, Native American or Indigenous person. So in terms of the general population, those are the 6 things that more than 50% of respondents said they wanted to see on the flag, or they would like to see on the flag. And then that's the general population. And then they were proposing various words for the new motto. I'll skip that. And then this was the public access survey. This is the non-representative sample, much larger sample size, not representative, distributed over the internet. And distributed through like listservs and different things like that. Those respondents had slightly different answers. There were 7 symbols that got more than 50%. The top one was right whale with 65%, and then coast or shoreline with 64%, and then cranberries was third, and then black-capped chickadee, mayflower, cod, in other words, the fish, and then the shape of Massachusetts was on there. Native American was a little bit lower. It was at 41% for that one. However, this is what got my attention. If you look specifically at the Native American respondents, preferred symbols for the seal among Native American respondents on this like non-representative, non-statistically representative large sample size. 224 respondents, which was higher than the, like proportionally higher than the state percentage of Native Americans. The top thing that they voted for, that they said they would strongly like or somewhat like, was to have a Native American or Indigenous person on the flag. And by a large margin, if you look at the strongly like percentage, 52% of them said strongly like having a Native American on the flag. The second place one was 27%. Oh, no, the second place one, I guess, was 35% for red-tailed hawk. This, like, you take this and you put it side by side with the fact that all these activists are speaking in the name of the Native Americans, and the ones serving on the commission are like, Native Americans find it very offensive that a Native American is on the flag. But you actually ask 224 Native Americans, and more than half of them have said, I really like having a Native American on the flag. I like that idea. Now, this did not specify, do you like the current one, or would you like a different one? You know, like what the Mashpee Wampanoag said, we want a different guy. We want one of our guys on there, you know. So that was not clarified. You know, the survey data itself did not get at that. But I think it's kind of telling, talking about this process, that you have, like, we're doing this in the name of Native Americans, and like to come back to the whole paternalistic thing, like it's paternalistic. You could talk about it being paternalistic to depict the Indian to begin with. You know, it's paternalistic to say we're going to go to the Massachusetts people and we're going to fix them by making them Christian. And, you know, like that's paternalistic. It's also paternalistic to speak on their behalf and say, well, the Native Americans find this offensive, when apparently at least some proportion of them don't find it offensive. Isn't that paternalistic too? It's kind of funny to me that there are people advocating to remove a Native man and people suggest the ship that brought Puritans. Okay, so yeah, that's unclear. Maybe I didn't read through all the verbiage of them describing it. I don't know if it was made clear. It probably was not, you know, knowing how surveys work. Probably they did not clarify what they meant by Mayflower. Did they mean the ship or did they mean the plant? Some Native American activists might care a lot in the negative, and the community at large cares a little in the positive. Yes. Yes. Although they did vote strongly like. They did strongly like it. Although that's not a measure of how much they care in general. So yeah, Osmium is totally correct. They could just not care very much and still say they would strongly like having it. You know. No, they surveyed thousands and thousands of people. Let me find the numerical description. I think it might be farther up. This entire report is 179 pages, but the part that talks about the survey is only like 20 pages or something. These are the two, okay, demographic profile of the two surveys. So the representative survey, which we're not talking about, had a total of, wait, 342 people. I misremembered. 342 people total responses in the representative sample survey, okay? But of those, only 8 were Native American. And it's not specified, are they natives, are they Massachusetts natives, or natives from some other place that moved to Massachusetts? Now, on the public access survey, which was not representative but had a much larger sample, they got 10,000 responses. And of those, 244 were Native American. So I misspoke. I misremember. Not 224, 244 were Native American. And again, it's not specified. Are they, which ones are Wampanoag, Massachusetts, Nipmuc, and which ones come from other states? Which to me, I saw that result and I immediately thought there really needs to be more demographic data collected on this. If we're doing this in order to avoid offending Indians, then we need to ask more Indians what they really think. Is this a case of a small group of very dedicated, very passionate activists who are motivated by moral imperative that are assuming that everyone else feels the same way, that everyone who's Indian feels the way they do? Or is the, is it the case that they're wrong? Or it's possible they're right. This does not mean that the majority of Indians in Massachusetts actually want the native to stay on the flag. This means that the majority of the ones they asked said that. But this was not a representative sample. And the reason they did a non-representative sample that got a much larger response was partly because the representative sample was going to get such a small response from Native Americans because Native Americans are such a tiny portion of the population. This, I feel like, should have been a giant red flag that maybe this entire project is possibly, not necessarily, but possibly based on a false idea. This entire time we've been assuming that the flag is offensive, and maybe it is. Simply saying that you want a Native American on the flag does not mean that you want the current design. But to say we have to definitely not have a Native American on there, and actually these are two separate things, because when the person in the meeting who said no, we should not have that Wampanoag chief on the flag because that is exclusionary of other Native Americans who are not Wampanoag. Which actually, to be honest, there aren't very many others that aren't Wampanoag. There are several Wampanoag bands, and then there's a Nipmuc group, and I don't think there are any others that at least have state or federal recognition. I guess I'd have to go and look, but anyway, they were saying that in the name of being inclusive of everybody, not necessarily because they thought Indians would be offended. So maybe that we have this this movement is not just about fixing this perceived wrong that's done against Native Americans. It's also about achieving some larger goal of creating a symbol that is equally applicable to all residents of Massachusetts, regardless of their background. You dispense with the whole polling thing because that's what the referendum is for. True, but it depends on the shape of the referendum. I don't know if you have more information than I do, if there is even going to be a referendum. And then what are the choices? If there is a referendum, what choices will be presented to the people? Because it seems to me that the Healy administration is pretty determined to create a new design. Like, they've already decided the old design is evil. A new design must be picked. So would they even give the voters the option of the old design? Wouldn't they have already decided that the old design is unacceptable? Blue Jay, I also wonder where they went to ask the natives. I don't know how Massachusetts is, but in the South, you either go to reservations or casinos. They did, for this internet thing, they went on a lot of internet, like online communities. They specifically say listserv. And I'm like, are people on listserv still? But anyway, I got the idea that they were generally looking at, they didn't say Facebook groups, but I would think that that was kind of the place they were going. They said listservs. Like, that's so... Listserv is so 1997. Anyway, a lot of the Native Americans in Massachusetts live either on or near the Cape or on Martha's Vineyard. Right. Yes, there are two Wampanoag yeah, that's right. Martha's Vineyard, I forgot was where the other one is. The Gay Head Wampanoag are on Martha's Vineyard, and the Mashpee Wampanoag are in Mashpee, which is in Barnstable County in Cape Cod. Where these commission members voted in or appointed, they were appointees. Yeah, they were appointed, I think, the second committee that was formed in 2024. Yeah, some of them were governor appointees, some of them were appointees by different officials. You know, like the Secretary of the Commonwealth had an appointee. Secretary of Education actually served directly on it. Well, I mean, you're saying they're supposed to have a special election just for this flag and seal commission? That's a little bit convoluted. I don't know. You gotta, at some point, you just have to appoint some people, you know? Where was I? Talked about this poll. And this was actually raised. It was kind of funny. It was, where was I? If I can find it. In the minutes to one of these meetings, somebody asked for clarification. Was it this one? It might not have been this one. But someone asked for clarification. He's like, am I reading this right? Does it say that the majority of the Native American respondents wanted an Indian on the flag? And they're like, yes, that is what it said. And then they just moved on. I wish I could find that. It was funny. It was not a commission member that said that. I think it was like, shoot. I think it was a member of the legislature that asked them for clarification. So I don't know where, it was like some kind of hearing or something. We went through the third round selection. Some of you guys wanted to see, I actually don't know. Let's see. I mean, I know there's this one website that has this article, most unhinged submissions for a new Massachusetts state flag. So we could take a look at these. So here's that dinosaur with his Dunkin' coffee. Here's some of the other... What are you talking about? That's not unhinged. That turkey one is a really good one. Of course, you have the requisite laser flag. So this was a whale shooting a laser out of his eye. And then some cranberries. This one is quite a thing right there. That's a senator, a U.S. senator who is very famous because she ran for president in 2016, I believe. Isn't the woman on the flag the Governor Maura Healey? Oh, is that Maura Healey? I thought that was Senator Warren. I think you're right. Yeah, never mind. I wasn't looking very closely. I like this motto. And they don't have any sense of humor. This would have been an awesome one. Every country should have a variation of the national animal shooting lasers. Yeah, they totally should. Well, the thing is, they're both white women, so they look alike. White people look alike. Scotland having unicorns shooting lasers would be really cool. Yeah, I agree. All right, were there any others on here? There's that one. The France of the 80s. I'm actually not even sure what that means. That's hilarious. I like that one. This is, for those of you who are from out of country, this is a football score. New England Patriots versus Atlanta Falcons. Which game was this? Was that a particular game? 2016 Super Bowl. Okay. All right. So... Oh, they came back from that from one. That's the joke. Okay. Yeah, I was not following the NFL back then. Yeah. I stopped following the NFL in like 2013. I think the 2013 season is the last one I watched. And I got busy with my work. And for a while, we didn't have a TV. So, yeah, I just wasn't watching football anymore. Yeah, so I basically everything I know about the NFL is like it's frozen in 2012, 2013. I know nothing. The Kansas City Chiefs winning the Super Bowl penetrated my cloud of ignorance, but otherwise I have not been following it. Oh, so here's some normal ones. There are 104. Oh, this might be the. Hold on. This is the second round. Can I do this? Oh shoot, it's not going to work. Hold on. Oh, okay. We can look at the second round ones. See, this is a more normal one that really should have gotten through. And I see this, and I want this. So this is one of the submissions made it the second round, did not make it to the third round. Yeah, right. It has a pine tree, so it's basically the main flag. Exactly. That might be part of it. I don't know how many of them ranked it low for having a pine tree, but it has 3 colors, so it's correct from that point of view. It might have been regarded as not reproducible enough. It might have been ranked lower because of reproducibility, because it might be they thought you make it small, you won't be able to see some of the detail, like the tree would get really small or something. So the democratic process of this whole flag design doesn't start until the choices are already laid out. I think it's perfectly reasonable to find objection to that. These commission members are not representative of the state's constituents. They are the, I was going to make a joke, but it could be misinterpreted. Never mind. I'm already going to get canceled twice over. I'll save my communism joke. Anyway, so here's another pine tree flag. Oh, this is cool. Pine tree with some 6 Mayflowers. Of course, the 6. But otherwise, it's a pretty flag. This was interesting. This kind of reminds me of one of the New Zealand ones when they were doing their flag business back like 10 years ago now. They had a flag that had this kind of shape on it. Okay, here's another pine tree with 6 big stars. Oh, that really does bother me. Here's one that got through the finals. Wait, Mongolia. Oh yeah, I didn't even notice that. That does kind of look like Mongolia's flag. There's another 6. Finally one without a 6. I don't know what this is supposed to represent. Oh, this reminds me on the existing Massachusetts flag. Originally, it was double-sided. It had the coat of arms on one side. On the other side, it had a shield with a pine tree on it. And they did away with that at some point to make the flag more simple. Just have a single side. One idea that they could have gone with was just to have the pine tree on the shield instead of the man. Oh, and here's one. Oh, this is interesting. This is a reference to the whale. I think that's what that shape is supposed to be. Now here they have a number 4. I'm not sure what the number 4 is supposed to refer to. Oh, I guess the seals must be mixed in here. So, that's interesting. So the seal submission that made it to the finals, they did not include the flag portion of it. Oh, they might be cranberries. Yeah, you're right. Those must be cranberries. Which is, it's weird how they we don't care about consistency between these 3 things. And of course, there's no reason to be consistency. Ted Kay told them when he met with them on Zoom, he told them, yeah, it doesn't matter if the seal and the flag are consistent with each other. So I think they just ran with that. They're like, we're not going to worry about any consistency. I feel like people already don't really care about the flag anyway. They only get excited because there's a contest they can enter. They just gathered like 20 Massachusetts historians and picked one of their submissions. I think people would forget after a week. Yeah. It gets people involved. Yeah, well, democracy's supposed to get people involved, I guess. This has that shield that was on the reverse of the flag in the old days, but it moves the star over to the side, and then it has 6 stars. Oh my gosh, 6 happens over and over and over again. I like the cog. This reminds me of one of those, was it Illinois? One of the Illinois submissions had a cog. I'll skip the mottos. That's one of the finalists for the flag. This one's kind of nice. I wonder why this one didn't make it through. The Mayflower has 6 petals. That's really upsetting. Oh, here's an example of AI. I thought this was a really attractive seal, but it is AI. They'd have to have an artist do a real version of it. Oh yeah, here's a flag. Oh wait, was that a flag? Is that a flag with a 1-to-3 ratio, or what's going on? I can't tell if they're supposed to be white. It'd be really cool if somebody had gone with different proportions. There's the Mayflower flag that got through. And there's another Mayflower flag. There's an arrow. Oh my gosh. The whole point is an arrow pointing downward means Indian pacification. So I guess this kind of missed the point. That Mayflower is a little bit better, but that does give me strong Japanese prefecture vibes. No, I agree with you, Sebi. It's not bad to use AI to visualize the idea. If you're not an artist and you want to make the submission, yeah, because when they can then get a real artist and redo it. Right, breaking shape convention would be cool, but those aren't the norms they want to subvert. That's right. Yorkist flower. It does look like that. You're right. Wouldn't a state flag with odd proportions look strange when displayed with other state flags in official settings? It would, and it does, because we have some state flags with unusual proportions, and what ends up happening is they aren't honored. Even within the state, they are not honored. They'll just do a 2x3 or a 3x5, the standard shapes that the manufacturers use. So yeah, it wouldn't even matter. Like Rhode Island has an unusual ratio that's almost square but not quite, but in practice they always just use rectangular, the same rectangular dimensions. I've only seen a square Rhode Island flag a handful of times in my life. Almost always it's a generic rectangle. Yeah. There's another state that has really unusual proportions. Oh, Idaho has really unusual proportions. Idaho is really like shorter. I think there are a few others too. I was encountering that when I was making the thumbnail for my state flag video because I was using the actual proportions, but then they don't all line up. So I had to spend some time making it so that they would all look right next to each other. This pine tree with star on shield motif happens quite a lot. And you know what? I think it happens a lot for a reason. I think that's kind of the natural direction to go. And it really surprises me and disappoints me with the flag commissions. Well, especially the second one, the current one, because they did not go in that direction. They deliberately chose to not go in that direction, which is really dumb. Like this more than anything, if you're gonna take the historic coat of arms off, this kind of design is the one that is, oh my gosh, except for the 6-pointed star, good grief. But this is the like this is Massachusetts. This is already kind of already there as a symbol waiting to be used. Also, a lot of the children submitted flags that broke the simple enough a child can draw rule. Yep. Which is, I'm just so disappointed. I didn't watch the meeting that Ted K attended, but I read the minutes. And he just repeats all the same stuff. And I'm so disappointed. Like, my video made no difference to him. He's still repeating all the stuff, even the stuff that's just like obviously dumb, like the child can draw it. He still repeated that. And they're still using that principle here in Massachusetts now. None of the kids' flags are simple, yeah. I hate this ideal in people's heads of what a real flag should look like. Yeah. They just end up looking so generic and bland for the sake of symbolism. Yeah. Okay, so this one, these vertical red stripes incorporate the Sons of Liberty flag. Oh, that's an interesting idea, like make the star a Mayflower. That's kind of cool, as long as you keep it to 5 petals. But the Sons of Liberty, will this take me to the flag? Yes. So this was the flag of the Sons of Liberty. They were a political activist group, rabble-rousers in the colonies right before the American Revolution. And they were in Boston, and they had this flag that was red and white vertical stripes. So again, that's a, where was I? Okay. Again, that's another motif, an easy design to go back to if you're going to jettison the current coat of arms altogether and find new symbols. If you're going for symbols that represent the historic heritage of Massachusetts, the vertical red stripes are an obvious go-to. But again, that's not what they're going for on the commission. They're not going for historic. Wait, you are deriding the groupthink behind this, but you don't mind the think tank nature of the process. I just think it's unrealistic to have the flag commissioners be elected. I mean, at some point, you have to have appointees. Like, all of the cabinet appointees are appointees, right? I mean, in some states, some of the cabinet members are directly elected, but I don't know. KFC. Okay, now that I see KFC, I can't unsee it. All right. This one, the flag is kind of different. Here's another cog. Oh, that's the same cog. Somebody submit it twice. So we have a Minuteman and the Indian standing next to each other. I guess that's supposed to be compromise. If you elect the flag commissioners, then you also need to elect the electors who elect the flag commissioners. Exactly. We need to have democratic representation in the election of the... It says Getty Images. I love that this made it to the second round. It really kind of makes me wonder about the commissioners that they let this go through the second round. Maybe there was some kind of automated... It must have been because of scoring, that maybe it scored really well for color, and then and you know, the total points just had it so it made it through or something. This is so hilarious. It says Getty Images on it. They didn't even take the water. They didn't pay to get the watermark taken off before they submitted it to the state. And it reminds me of something somebody said in one of the meetings. She said, she was actually kind of complaining. I can't remember if I said this earlier. She was kind of complaining that they were using this rubric, but the rubric wasn't entirely satisfactory because it was mostly about technical aspects of the flag, and only one of the, she said, one of the 5 criteria was about design itself and whether the design is good. And what they ended up with was a bunch of flags scoring high that she, at least, wouldn't necessarily have scored that high if they were going more based on aesthetics. So I think that's a really interesting point that's not being talked about out in the public. It's not being talked about on Reddit. But, like, all you see, if all you see is the, I really need to cut down on my tabs so that I can actually go to the thing that I want to go to. Let's get rid of these. Where was it that... Yeah, so if all you see are the flags... These are the finalists, and that's all you know, then it's easy to imagine, oh, it's just because the commissioners think this is the prettiest, and this is what they would choose. But what she was saying in that meeting was, like, I'm kind of annoyed that, or it's kind of frustrating that I'm working with this rubric, and it's kind of constraining me and preventing me from choosing the designs I think are really good. Which I think really just goes to show, if you're applying the good flag, bad flag principles too closely, you end up with slop like this instead of the really good designs, because you're like, okay, we're going to stick to two or three colors, more of the three colors, we're going to rank the flag lower. And then what if the design had 4 colors, but it was really good? But then you got to rank it lower, and then it ends up not making it through to the next round. It's just, anyway. Okay, so we're almost 2/3 of the way through these. Yeah, legislate out good design. I mean, partly it's a function of it's a committee, and they have to come up with some. I don't know. I think I think you come up with the rubrics so that you make it seem like it's more objective. But it just, I'm kind of disappointed the COD flags didn't do as well in the scoring, and complexity was probably an issue. They probably ranked it lower because it wasn't simple enough. But I think, I'm sure it'd get made fun of if that ended up being the flag, but I think having a fish on a flag would be kind of cool. Here's a feather. Oh, see, that showed up twice again. Another one that showed up twice. That's weird. This has 12 stars around a pine cone. I don't know what the 12 would be referencing. Yeah, African Nordic, you get better flags if you respect 2 or 3 of the good flag, bad flag at any time. Yes, I agree. In fact, I was thinking about this back when I made that other video, and I didn't say it in the video, but I feel like it would be a stronger pamphlet and you come up with better designs if you say, here are the 5 principles, and when you're making the flag, you have to intentionally violate at least one of them. I think any design any design that meets all 5 tends to be very boring and oatmeal, milquetoast type thing. If you have one that's breaking the rule, breaking one of the principles here, one of the principles there, it ends up oftentimes being a more interesting design. If you think of the most interesting and beloved designs, well, think about the most interesting state flag designs. They tend not to meet all 5 rules or all 5 principles. The Texas state flag meets all 5, but the people of Texas would love that design no matter what, because they're just so impressed with themselves for being Texans. They could have a poop emoji on their flag and they would love it. But you think about Maryland, California, the people of Florida fly the Florida flag. Something I'm actually going to be making another state flag video not state flag video, but another video about flags eventually, maybe next year. And I will be raising this point then about the Florida state flag. People are oblivious to this, but in Florida, the state flag is actually pretty popular. But anyway, Virginia's another one that violates the 5 principles, and it's still a pretty popular flag among Virginians. Get the other 12 colonial states. Massachusetts is the pine cone. That must be what it was. Okay, cauliflower. This is good. I do wonder how they're going to pick the final flag. There's not a statewide vote this November. Yeah, so I thought you were going to know, because I was trying to find out and I couldn't find out, and I thought I just wasn't finding out, but that it existed. But apparently that's not been decided yet. I don't know if the governor has made a decision about it. I like this flag a lot. This flag kind of makes me think of a Russian republic. Yeah, Massachusetts SSR. But I really like it's original for sure. I'm sure that this design is what really hurt it because it's too complex. But I think it's a really cool design. It has 1, 2, 3, 4 colors. So that also probably hurt it in the rubric. But this is a great example of why the 2 or 3 color rule is a dumb rule. It's just a dumb, arbitrary rule that doesn't actually give you better flags at all. I mean, that entire rule should just be removed from the pamphlet. Nobody should ever consider the number of colors. There's no reason why you would ever need to consider that. If you have a color, if you have a flag that's really busy and has some really obnoxious design on it, the design and the busyness are what's going to flag it. And it doesn't matter if there are 20 colors on there. That's not the problem. Oh, this might be it. We might not. Oh, here's one. Oh, they put text on the flag. They have 4 different shades of green on the tree. Oh, this is a disaster. And then what is this, Gambia in the back? Yeah, this one. I can't believe this one and this one. Look at that font. Anyway, I can't believe these two made it to the second round. It had to have been the rubric they used. Oh, there's another example of them not using all 3. This submitter got their flag and seal, made it to the final round, but not the motto. Playing Breakout. Oh my gosh, you're right. That was a Breakout game, wasn't it? Oh, this is funny. Oh, okay, yeah. So they did this as the seal. This is basically a seal and motto double submission. The motto did not make it to the final round, but the seal did. The fact that this seal made it to the final round, that by itself is testimony that the process is broken. And I'm not even talking about necessarily the commissions and all that stuff and whatever, all the work they did, but specifically the rubric they chose was a disaster. It was a disaster. Should have asked me for a rubric. I could have come up with a rubric for them. The rubric should have focused more on content and less on superficial design features like how many colors it has and how simple the design is. It was such a missed opportunity for them to create the rubric that they did. Oh, cool. They used Latin. That was probably a mark against them. The general mood is that we should not have Latin on the seal. Are they picking a flag, seal, and motto individually, or what way they're picking the final for each? This seems very confusing. So people were free to submit all 3 and make them thematic, but the committees decided to ignore that and treat each one individually. Ted K gave them permission to have a flag and a seal that are completely unrelated. And so that's what they're running with. And so, yeah, they're evaluating each of those things individually, independent of each other. And then they're like, if it ends up that they're not thematic, they basically don't care. They are picking all 3, but yeah, they're not going to worry about synchronization between them. These people don't have the mandate, so the choices put in the referendum is irrelevant. Oh my gosh, Dex, you're so worked up about that. I love how one random guy gave permission and not like the governor or whatever the position would be. Well, Ted K is not one random guy. He is the world's expert on flags and flag design. Everyone knows that. He is the great guru of flag design. He knows all. He knows vexillologically all. Osmium doesn't like Latin mottos. Oh, kind of nerdy. Come on, man. The founding fathers were Rome weaves. Oh gosh. Motto should be Latin is a dead language in Latin. Well, I kind of agree with you. It'd be cool if they did that. Blue Jay didn't vote for Ted K. I'm kind of skipping across the seals. Oh, here's one that was hand-drawn. That one looks pretty good. Oh, this is the person who submitted We Honor All Life, guided by the first light. Their seal didn't make it. Oh, that's it. Yep, that's all the second tier ones, the semifinalists. What they should do in Latin is they should say 6th state of the United States of America in Latin. Okay, Cauliflower, I imagine the governor could say she doesn't like any of them and try again. Possibly. Possibly. Let me go to the let me go to these guys. Yeah, I guess that's possible. But that would mean leaving the current map, the current flag in place. And do you think that she would do that? I mean, I feel like for the activists who want the flag changed, they feel like this is almost like emergency level. Like this is this is because they use language like the current flag is causing harm. It's harming certain segments of the population of Massachusetts. If it's if it's causing harm, then doesn't it need to be changed, right? Wouldn't that be the logic, right? So if that's how it's perceived, it's 100% that's how it's perceived by the Democrats in the general court, in the state legislature. I don't know about Healy herself, but I would imagine she also feels the same way. So I'd feel like they would go with one just for the sake of stopping the harm from being done. All right, Dex, if it is that important, then it is deserving of at least a little injection of Democratic Republican procedure. Okay, so we don't know. I don't believe anybody knows. If Cauliflower doesn't know, then probably nobody knows at this point what the next step is. They've got the finalists. I mean, I haven't looked. I could try to go through the recent meetings and see if they've talked about what the next steps are, but I might just wait and see what the news says eventually down the road. But it might be that the governor or the commission, it might be the commission chooses one of the three as their recommendation. It might be that they'll just send all three. But whether it goes to the to the legislative body or whether it goes to the governor's office, I don't know. I think this is spearheaded by the governor, so I think it'll be up to the governor ultimately whether she puts it up to a vote or referendum. Culture war feels like a bottomless pit of misery. Either you're not allowed to be proud of anything or you're proud of the evil stuff. Choose your team. Exactly. Yeah. It's really sad that the American people, that we're kind of suffering through this right now. It's like it's so hard for us to have conversations because immediately people jump to one or the other of two binary conclusions about you based on how your language conforms to their expectations. Everything I've seen for next steps says the finalists go to the governor for review. Okay. I don't know if that means she picks something and that's the flag, or if it'll go to the ballot in 2026. Yeah, nobody knows. We'll just have to see what she does. I think if she just needs to pick one, she'll pick one, and that'll be the new flag. Yeah, and I don't know how she'll pick. It'll be interesting to see if public response has anything to do with it, or it has any effect. As far as I know, none of the three are really popular. I don't know if they were expecting one of them to be popular. I don't know, but the sense I get just looking at Reddit, which is definitely not representative, but but among the folks on Reddit, on the vexillology subreddit, they seem to like the 6 turkey feathers the most, the crimson one. So, if I wonder if they'll have a thing where they'll try to get a sense of what the popular opinion is, and she'll be like, well, everybody seems to like this design, so I'll just pick this design. I don't know, it seems like she would want to put it up to a vote, right? So she wouldn't be responsible, right? Wouldn't that just be the strategic thing to do? Is like, you don't want to take responsibility for it, you just put it up for a vote. The drawback to that is that there is hypothetically, there's the possibility that the voters would keep the current design. Although they could do what Georgia did. Because when Georgia had their vote, when was that? I can't remember when that was, but Georgia voted on changing their state flag. They gave the voters 2 options, and the 2 options did not include the old 1954 flag that has the X-shaped Confederate battle flag. Like, that just wasn't an option on the ballot. But in Mississippi, I can't remember what they did in Mississippi. Anyway, I'm sure they'll be looking at what the other states did and evaluating that. Everyone I've talked to personally is not a fan of the new flags, even if they agree that a new flag is needed. Yeah. And you know what? And this, to go back to what I was saying before, I am sure that those ones with the pine tree on shield, of course, is going to be like 20 over, but like the ones with the flag, oh yeah, there's breakout. The ones with the pine tree, not that one, but the pine tree on the shield, I think that would have had buy-in. I think the people would have been okay with that. This one, this one here, or this one. If they had gone with something like this, I think it would have had a lot more acceptance by the community. It's too bad that there were these personalities. See, I think what was going on, these personalities on the commissions, they were like, well, we definitely need to change it. Also, we need to get rid of any historical references or any like historical symbols. We need to start with a clean slate. Now, it's super easy to say that when your replacement flag is this kind of amorphous kind of thing where it's a blank slate, you know, it's a blank slate that it could be anything you could imagine. It's a very different thing when you get actual designs you're trying to pick. And gosh, I hope they were thinking about that. Like we're really gung ho on going completely blank slate. They were just assuming that some great new design would appear. I don't know. Like, what did they think the exit plan was for their commission? They have to make a recommendation. Their names are public knowledge. Everyone's going to know they picked some dumb design. Osmium, to be honest, out of the three, I probably picked the bloody towel one. That's right. Trump needs to send in the army to protect the flag. He probably will make an issue out of it, knowing him. Especially if he needs to affect the news cycle in any way to deflect attention from anything. He'll probably start tweeting about it or whatever platform he uses. It's so oversimplified compared to the old one. Reminds me of the Cracker Barrel situation. It's similar to corporate companies making their logos plain and boring. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it doesn't have to be that way because flags don't have to be that way. It's all because of Ted K's special little rules that all of a sudden people think it's got to, like, it's a manufactured situation that we end up with designs that are like that. Dex, the rubric is bad, the polling is useless, and they are actively listening to a man on a crusade to make all flags ugly and boring. Never underestimate how isolated these people are from the general population. Yeah, the more you guys talk about it, the more I think they really need a referendum. And they need to include the old design on it. It's just hard because, like, if you put one of these flags, or even all three, up against the current flag, and the public picks the current flag, is that because they really like the current flag? Or is it they don't really care, or many of them maybe don't really care for the current flag, they just hate these three designs, and they would pick a different flag if it were better? That's even a referendum is not really going to be decisive. Trump is beefing with Boston's mayor, Michelle Wu, so he probably will say something about the flag. Yeah, I 100% expect him to do so. I think it'd be cool if we had flags with a more like mid-century modern aesthetic. There's this. Actually, I say that, and I said mid-century, and I immediately thought of the flag of Toronto. So maybe I'm wrong. Flag of Toronto looked kind of bad. This is the flag of Toronto. This is a mid-century design, so maybe I'm wrong about mid-century. But sometimes you can take. I immediately. Oh wait, I'm wrong. But no, I think mid-century could be a good. Wait, I feel like random designs being sent in isn't a good way to pick a new flag. I think you're right. I think what you need to do, I think they're going about this totally wrong. And it's kind of lily-livered of them. It's kind of cowardly of them to do it that way. They're like, we're just going to open it up to the public, whatever the public wants. And then when you get a bunch of crappy designs, you just say, well, the public did, it's not our fault. The public submitted that. What they need to do is hire some actual artists and get them to make some submissions And to make that, then you get some really decent submissions that people would find really attractive. And then you put those up to a vote, maybe include the old flag too, put that in the referendum. You'd actually end up with a really nice flag. Osmium likes it. I love that. I don't like it. One thing though, to speak to architectural motifs, I do like this flag. Some people hate it, and they've talked about how much they hate it, but I really like this. Is the flag of Lincoln, Nebraska. This is a city flag in Lincoln, Nebraska, which is in the middle of the country. Got this Art Deco thing going, and it's really cool. I really like it. Very distinctive. It's a new flag, but it doesn't suffer from that new flag look that they all seem to have. Do you think experience in the state's history is necessary, or the simple fact that only a select few people would know about such history defeats the whole point of people identifying with it? Or do you think that after historians affected what's represented, that people would become more familiar and educated with such subjects anyway? I think if you're going to have a state symbol, like a flag, like symbols are never self-explanatory, no matter what you put on there. Whatever the symbol's going to be, you need to educate the public about what it means. It's part of nation building, really. It's part of building a civic public that's engaged in the affairs of their republic, in this case of the state. So, you know, you incorporate it into the curriculum of your education for the kids. They grow up learning what these symbols are. I mean, when I was a kid in elementary school, I remember learning about the state flag and the state coat of arms and what the different elements of it meant and stuff. You should do that, you know? So then it becomes a matter of what ideals and what characteristics, what about us do we want to put forward on the flag and on the coat of arms that is tied together with the ideals that we're trying to instill in the population, so that becomes part of that civic lesson for the kids learning about it. But, you know, no matter what, you're going to have some education to explain to kids what these symbols mean. Okay, so unpopular. The current flag is not unpopular obviously because of the design. It's unpopular because so it's not a matter of people in Massachusetts being full of Ted Ks, being a bunch of Ted Ks. It's about them believing that it's morally wrong. You know, it's not an aesthetic issue, it's a moral issue. And I do suspect Massachusetts, I mean, I could be wrong. I don't know. I don't think any polling's been done, not that I know of. But, I mean, if you poll the people of Massachusetts, a large proportion of them will not have given any thought at all to the flag. But the ones who have given thought to the flag, many of them probably will just assume that it's got a dark, it's dark, you know? Yeah, so it's part of the commission's commission to educate people about the meaning of the current flag. And unfortunately, the general viewpoint on the commission is that this is an evil flag. And so that's going to be part of their education. I don't know if they have an educational component. The Secretary of Education is actually serving on the Flag Commission. I don't know if when they come up with curriculum recommendations, I don't know if that'll ever actually be incorporated into the education system. Oh, here's a poll. It's a poll from 2023 that says that in Massachusetts, 30% strongly opposed, 23% strongly in favor, and 25% neither for nor against. So is that opposed to the current flag or opposed to changing the flag? 6th state. TYZJ's trolling me. 6th state in the union. 30% are opposed to replacing the flag, 23% strongly in favor. Those numbers for in favor are lower than I expected. So I guess the other ones would be like mildly opposed and mildly in favor, or somewhat opposed, somewhat in favor would be the other two. That would suggest that a lot of it would come down to messaging during the referendum. And if the flag activists are um, able to get their messaging out, certainly that newspaper editor from Montague, what's his name, Det Mold or something, I can't remember his name. Oh my gosh, is it still up? I think I closed it. But I'm sure he will do everything in his power to get a certain narrative about the flag out there, and I mean, he probably has the means to do it to some extent. The question is, the activists who want to change the flag, I think they are pretty organized, and they are motivated. Question is, the people who want to keep the old flag, are they organized and motivated? And that's probably a more open question. There are probably a lot of people who passively want to keep the old flag, but they're not involved in anything that would involve keeping the old flag. So I would give the edge to the change people. If even assuming we're still even just assuming that this flag is going to be on the referendum, that there's going to be a referendum, and if there is a referendum, that this flag will be on there. For all we know, the governor might just take the three finalists and put them on there and just tell the voters, hey, choose which of these three you want. I learned about every component of the Portuguese flag growing up, and I think it's a good thing. Problem is, they just brought up the surface level explanation without really going into it. Not even in other lessons, really. But alas, I was 9 years old. So well, yeah, there's only so much you can say to a 9-year-old. I don't really understand how you want children or really anyone to grasp it when you just assume we have to teach them young because it's essential to their identity. I mean, I agree with you. I think it'd be really good to incorporate it into lessons later on also. I mean, teach them when they're 9, but then also have a unit on it when they're in high school. Knowing the symbols of your republic or of your society, of your political society, are part of socializing them to participate in the democratic process. I believe that. I mean, it's a matter of opinion, but that's my personal opinion. So just as it's important to explain to them what's the election process in general, what are the parts of our government here in the U.S., we have 3 branches of government. What are they constituted of? You have to learn the parts of the Constitution, all blah, blah, blah. You have to learn all that stuff. You should also learn this is what the flag represents. This is the design elements on the flag, which I think most Americans do know. This is the Great Seal of the United States. This is what the different elements of the Great Seal, which I actually recall being taught in elementary school what those mean. But yeah, I think that's part of being citizenized. Danny, at the top of the current Massachusetts flag is the Bedford Flag. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I totally forgot to mention that. So this crest, I talked about how this crest, the arm with sword, was part of Paul Revere's seal in 1775. I failed to mention that also it was an element on the Bedford flag. Now, I don't know. I wasn't able to find, this is the Bedford flag, which was a flag used by the Minutemen in Massachusetts in 1775. So the Minutemen were the militia that basically were defending against the British occupation in the early days of the American Revolution. And they had the symbol of the arm holding the sword. And again, of course, this is the connotation of we are going to defend our liberties against British oppression and tyranny. And so this is another kind of context for the coat of arms having this arm with sword. I was not able to find any specific, clear, definitive explanation of where exactly the arm with sword comes from. Was it a conscious hearkening specifically to the Bedford flag, or was it a conscious hearkening to the colonial on the 1775 seal, or were there other flags that were used in the Revolutionary period that were used by militias that had an arm with sword? But either of those doesn't matter. It's clear that the design intent was this represents colonial defense or Massachusetts defense against British tyranny. There's unmistakable. There's no way you could make this. There are many things in history that are open to interpretation that are, it's too vague to know for sure. This one, 100%, we know we can say for certain even though there's no smoking gun that tells us, well, I put it on there because of this reason in 1780. It doesn't matter. Like, given the context of what was going on at the time, and given what other flags and symbols existed at the time, we can say unmistakably this is part of that connotation. Punk Ferret, my semester 1 political lecture talked about something similar, that we have people expected to vote but not being educated in politics and not educating themselves in current politics. Yep. The same here. People not educated on the history of the flag or doing their own self-education on it, being asked about it, or giving an opinion on why it's doing harm. Yeah. Oh, yeah, the Bedford flag. You guys like the Bedford flag. That is a nice flag, right? I mean, they could have... I feel like... I could be mistaken. I feel like this might have been one of the first tier submissions from the public. They might have just like... I think they just took the Bedford flag and submitted it. I could be mistaken. Local history should be an emphasis in high school. I agree. People are woefully uneducated about city and state history, city and state politics, civics. There's a lot of talk, and especially in the media, there's a lot of information about the federal level, but we don't get that for the city and state levels. The chairman of this commissariat are sympathetic or even in support of the beliefs of the activists. Yes, they are. If their messaging echoes the activists, I don't see why the governor's office won't do the same, even if they put it to a vote. Yeah. And there was a... see if I can find it. And I don't know if my audio is set up. Turn on the audio here. Hopefully this doesn't mess anything up with my setup if I plug this in. Let me show you what this guy says.
Be able to come.
Yeah, it is too low, isn't it?
Here in this historic Senate chamber.
Yeah, it is low, and I can't make it louder. I don't know why it won't cooperate. But what he does, I can just summarize what he does. You can see it's Senator Jason Lewis speaking about the need to design a new flag, new seal, flag, and motto for Massachusetts. It's on the Jason Lewis, his own channel. What he does is he says, I'm speaking on behalf of changing the flag. When was he saying this? This was June of 2024. So this must have been when they were setting up the new flag commission. And he says, this is really important because the current design is really harmful, is hurting people. And he basically reads off of, I closed that tab, but remember that journalist who's an activist out of Western Massachusetts who goes around to the different town meetings and gets them to pass a resolution. And he feeds them this false narrative about how this is all about white triumphalism and celebration of violence against Indians. And he made this handout. It's like, not a pamphlet, but he made this handout, this like, learn about the state flag, and it has these little like call outs. And he's the guy who said it's a Frankenstein design. I could play it. It's annoying. All he does is he reads off that, he reads off of that handout from that journalist guy who made up a bunch of stuff. Like the guy who, remember I was saying, if the arrow is pointing downward, that means the Indian is pacified, right? That's the guy I'm talking about. He made this little sheet with all of this like distorted, misleading information about the intent of the design. And he basically spends this time reading off of that sheet. Yeah, it's absolutely in the government. So this is I don't know what role he has in the Senate, but he's a member of the General Court, the state legislature. So I firmly believe, was it Dex that said it? I don't see why the governor's office won't do the same, even if they do put it to a vote. I 100% agree. I mean, I'm sure that's what, they've all basically decided they're going to get rid of the old design, I feel like. Yeah, I'm not going to play it. You guys can find it if you want. I'll let you guys, but it's kind of annoying. I got annoyed watching it because I'm like, I already know this stuff is false, It bothers me when people spread misinformation about history, especially when they're coming from a position of authority, like a state legislator or somebody in government. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and sign off. Thank you very much for joining me for the stream. I don't remember what the topic is for next week. I probably should have checked that before getting on this one so I can promote it, but I will be streaming next Monday morning, inshallah, North America time. So be sure to join me for that. And I will see you guys later.